Chapter 672. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua mysteriously said, "Second brother, don't worry. Wait until we kill all these blood wolves, then I'll make your dream come true." How could Zhang Xiaohu believe her? He only curled his lips and said, "I know, Xiaohua, concentrate on killing the wolves. There should be a limit to how much you can comfort your second brother." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and did not speak. The two brothers, Zhang Xiaohua and Zhang Xiaohu, had not seen each other for 4 to 5 years. They both thought that the other had met with an accident. Now that they saw each other again, they were naturally excited and talked more. In particular, Zhang Xiaohua was multitasking. While continuously using Chasing Dream to kill the blood wolves, she was also chatting with Zhang Xiaohu. Unexpectedly, she did not put the Blood Wolf King in her heart. At first, the Blood Wolf King did not care and only treated it as an interesting pastime. However, as time passed, more and more blood wolves were killed by Zhang Xiaohua, and the Blood Wolf King gradually realized that something was wrong. The Blood Wolf King looked up to the sky and howled. The remaining blood wolves received the order and moved, surrounding Zhang Xiaohua from all directions. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. How could he be afraid of these blood wolves? Previously, when he had just entered the Yulon Great Grasslands, he had already figured out the weaknesses of the blood wolves. After hunting for a while, he became even more confident. However, he did not panic as he took half a step back and returned to Zhang Xiaohu's side. Soon after, he sat down with his legs crossed. Holding a yuan stone in his hand, he wholeheartedly controlled Chasing Dream to protect the surrounding 10 feet area. Any blood wolf that entered this 10 feet area would immediately be assassinated by Chasing Dream. The Blood Wolf King became a little impatient after seeing that its attacks were not successful. It growled again, and the wolf pack's attack changed again. Dozens of huge blood wolves leaped out from the wolf pack and pounced on Zhang Xiaohua and the others from all directions. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense could not go very far, but it could only go within 10 feet. Every movement was within the range of his divine sense. Although there were many blood wolves, how could their movements be faster than his divine sense? Like a dozen bolts of lightning, the heads of the blood wolves were pierced through like tofu by Zhu Meng. The corpses of the blood wolves fell to the ground, and Zhu Meng circled around a few more times before stabbing the other blood wolves to death. Good. Zhang Xiaohu, who was watching the battle from the side, could not help but exclaim. Hearing second brother's praise, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but smile bitterly in his heart. He had underestimated the blood wolf pack. Just killing dozens of blood wolves seemed easy, but it consumed a lot of divine sense and a lot of qi. Right now, his divine sense was mostly absorbed by the silver eye of unknown origin. Even his divine sense that was gradually recovering was also absorbed by it. Although he was holding a primordial stone in his hand, the amount of yuan qi he could absorb was limited. If it was just like before, it should not be a problem. However, the attack just now made him see his own weakness. He could either rely on the power of the seal to defend, or use the method of guerrilla warfare to achieve his goal of killing all the blood wolves. Of course, he also knew that if he could directly kill the Blood Wolf King, the blood wolves that were surrounding him would disperse. However, he had been chased by Huangfeng for the past few days. His heart was filled with anger. Now that he saw second brother injured by the blood wolves, he could not help but be ruthless. He wanted Chasing Dream to take advantage of the situation and leave the thousands of blood wolves behind. Therefore, he did not want to directly face the Blood Wolf King for the time being. After thinking for a while, Zhang Xiaohua said, "Second brother, you stay here first. Don't worry, I will be back soon." Zhang Xiaohu nodded and said, "You go first. Leave the jade water sword behind. I can hold on for a while." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "I still need to use the jade water sword. You just watch." Then Zhang Xiaohu was somewhat puzzled and said, "Then how do I block the blood wolves?" "Haha, second brother, you don't need to. Just sit there and watch the battle." Zhang Xiaohua laughed loudly and leaped into the air, throwing himself into the midst of the blood wolves. Chasing Dream followed Zhang Xiaohua and flew into the depths of the blood wolves. In just a few moments, another few blood wolves were beheaded. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua leave, the blood wolves at the side saw an opportunity and pounced at Zhang Xiaohu. Zhang Xiaohu was also shocked. He wanted to dodge elsewhere, but before he could move, the blood wolf that was pouncing over was blocked by an invisible light barrier. It could no longer pounce in front of him. Zhang Xiaohu was even more surprised. How many mysterious divine arts does this little brother of mine have? Since there was no danger to his life, Zhang Xiaohu naturally turned his attention to Zhang Xiaohua. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua was like a wolf in a flock of sheep. He used the levitation technique to drift left and right. Wherever he went, chasing Dream was invincible. He did not care about the Bloodwolf's attacks at all, and stabbed at the Bloodwolf's vital points from unimaginable angles. Although the Bloodwolves were innately valiant and rather courageous, they were still ferocious beasts with intelligence. This was the first time they were being killed by someone. After a long time, it was inevitable that they would be afraid. In the end, after a while, wherever Zhang Xiaohua went, the blood wolves avoided him and did not dare to attack. Its sharpness formed a 30-foot gap around Zhang Xiaohua, and none of the blood wolves dared to cross it. Although Zhang Xiaohua used the levitation technique and jumped into the blood wolves when they were not on guard. After killing a few more, the blood wolves were even more careful. Zhang Xiaohua almost did not have any chance. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua was a little tired. The one-sided massacre just now had very well alleviated his hatred towards the blood wolves that besieged Zhang Xiaohu. With him around, Zhang Xiaohu and Chang'e would not be in any danger. Roughly calculating, the number of blood wolves that died under chasing Dream's sword was already around 400 to 500, which accounted for more than half of the blood wolves in the pack. Otherwise, the remaining blood wolves would not be so afraid. This kind of incomparable massacre really made Zhang Xiaohua feel very bored. Maybe it's time to end it. Zhang Xiaohua turned to look at the Blood Wolf King that was standing far away. The Blood Wolf King at this time was also constantly roaring, wanting to command the Blood Wolves to surround Zhang Xiaohua. Unfortunately, the Blood Wolves were all frightened and did not listen to its command at all. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua looking at it, the Blood Wolf King also signaled that this was the time for the final battle and howled to the sky. The surrounding Blood Wolves all understood the Blood Wolf King's meaning and consciously opened up a path. At the end of the path was Zhang Xiaohua, who kept the Jade Water Sword. The Blood Wolf King proudly walked through the path with its head held high, as if it was being admired by thousands of people. When it arrived in front of Zhang Xiaohua, it stared at Zhang Xiaohua's eyes. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua also stared at the Blood Wolf King with interest. The Blood Wolf King's physique was obviously 3 times larger than an ordinary blood wolf. Its tall body looked exceptionally majestic in the mountain wind. Suddenly, the Blood Wolf King's thick hind legs stomped, and its entire body was like a huge hill crashing towards Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua's body was tall and thin. Facing the Blood Wolf King that was a head taller than her, it was obvious that she was frail. The Blood Wolf King pounced in front of Zhang Xiaohua, and its thick front claws swiped like a bolt of lightning. Just based on this claw, among all the disciples who were undergoing the Orchid Evening refinement, perhaps only the inner disciples could dodge this attack. However, this move was far from posing any threat to Zhang Xiaohua. Zhang Xiaohua raised her fist to meet the attack, nimbly dodging the sharp wolf claws, and her fist landed on the soft fur of the wolf claws. With a pung sound, the Blood Wolf King, who was caught off guard, was sent flying back. The Blood Wolf King was also valiant. It lost its balance and struggled in the air, but it couldn't avoid the fate of being thrown to the ground. After landing, the Blood Wolf King roared and immediately got up, pouncing over again. This time, Zhang Xiaohua didn't use her bare hands. Instead, she shook the Jade Water Sword, and a 2-foot sword ray shot out, piercing towards the Blood Wolf King's throat. The Blood Wolf King was already prepared. Although it was inconvenient to move in the air, it blocked the sword ray with its front claws. With a dang sound, it was the sound of metal colliding with stone. The Blood Wolf King's hard claws actually deflected the invincible sword ray. Zhang Xiaohua was a little surprised. I didn't expect the Blood Wolf King to have such an ability. It seems that even the inner disciples of the Lingering Fragrance Peak would have to put in a lot of effort to deal with it. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua pulled herself together and went up to fight with the Blood Wolf King. It was a very strange scene. Hundreds of blood wolves quietly surrounded a high slope. On the high slope, A tall and thin young man wielded his sword like a dragon as he fought with a huge golden blood wolf. Not far away, among the wolf pack, there was a tall man half huddled on the ground, nervously watching the scene. Beside him, there was a pretty girl lying quietly. Zhang Xiaohua and the Blood Wolf King fought back and forth for the time it took to brew a cup of tea. There was no clear winner or loser. Just as Zhang Xiaohua wanted to change her move, the Blood Wolf King pounced over and waved its front claws, attacking the left side of Zhang Xiaohua's chest. Zhang Xiaohua's jade water sword pierced the wolf's claws. At this moment, the Blood Wolf King suddenly opened its bloody mouth and spat out a mouthful of air towards Zhang Xiaohua's chest. Zhang Xiaohua was obviously stunned. What kind of move is this? Just as Zhang Xiaohua was surprised, the breath arrived in front of him. Zhang Xiaohua swept it with his divine sense, and his face suddenly changed. The heaven-earth yuan qi in front of him seemed to have undergone a drastic change. The Blood Wolf King had spat out something that looked like a blade, and it was heading straight for his face. In a hurry, Zhang Xiaohua made a gesture and immediately used the familiar earth escape. Zhang Xiaohua's figure disappeared from the spot, and then appeared behind the Blood Wolf King and Zhang Xiaohu in surprise. Hee. Zhang Xiaohua smiled. I knew this Blood Wolf King must have some trump card. Zhang Xiaohua had never heard of the ability to spit out wind blades, but presumably, the Blood Wolf King had not mastered it. The strength of the wind blades was also very weak. Otherwise, at such a close distance, Zhang Xiaohua would have been seriously injured. Chapter 673. The Blood Wolf King's wind blade was out of Zhang Xiaohua's expectations, but it was also within Zhang Xiaohua's expectations. However, he did not expect that the Blood Wolf King would not use this kind of colorless and silent killing technique. This wind blade was really amazing. At first, it was like the sound of the wind, following the Blood Wolf King's growl. It only started to move when it was close. If not for the help of Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense, how could he know that this wind-like thing could actually hurt him? Zhang Xiaohua did not have time to turn his head. In his divine sense, the wind blade actually flew out 10 feet away, followed by the wail of a blood wolf. It must have been accidentally injured by the wind blade. Listening to the sound, it was already 40 to 50 feet away. To be able to have such a strong force from such a long distance, it really made Zhang Xiaohua feel a little scared. Good. Fortunately, young master's character is good and has always been releasing his divine sense. Otherwise, TSK, at least his face would be disfigured. When the Blood Wolf King saw that the wind blade did not work, he was also stunned on the spot. In his impression, this wind blade consummate skill had always been effective in one strike, and it had only failed when facing the two kings of the Yulon Grand Canyon. However, this unfamiliar intruder in front of him actually. Seeing that the Blood Wolf King had stopped attacking, Zhang Xiaohua was slightly surprised. Then he laughed. Good. I'll let you experience this young master's methods. After speaking, he flew up. The Jade Water Sword's sword light spat out another 2 feet, and directly pierced towards the Blood Wolf King. The Blood Wolf King was stunned for a moment. Seeing that the sword light was about to reach him, he did not dodge. He simply opened his mouth and shot out another invisible wind blade. Zhang Xiaohua also wanted to test the power of the wind blade. He did not dodge and directly pierced the wind blade that was flying towards him. It was strange. The wind blade was clearly a wind-like object, but when the sword gleam pierced it, there was an indescribable sound. Then, the sword gleam suddenly retracted and was suppressed into the body of the Jade Water Sword. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. The Jade Water Sword was given to her second brother. She didn't want it to be broken now. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly pulled back her sword, not daring to use her sword to directly receive the wind blade. At this time, the wind blade was already close to her. Zhang Xiaohua stretched out her hand and simulated her true qi into her palm. With a sidestep, she dodged the wind blade and sent out another air-splitting palm. Unfortunately, this time, the wind blade showed the characteristics of the wind. The air-splitting palm's inner qi actually flashed and could not hit the wind blade at all. Zhang Xiaohua was a little curious. This is interesting. Then Zhang Xiaohua put away the Jade Water Sword. Together with her right hand's middle finger and index finger, She pointed forward. The chasing dream that had been hovering in mid-air made a Z sound. It was as if it was going to tear through the air and pierce towards the Blood Wolf King's throat. The Blood Wolf King had already seen the power of the chasing dream. At this time, seeing that the small sword actually made a sound, how could he not know that Zhang Xiaohua was using her full strength? The Blood Wolf King was not afraid of the Jade Water Sword's sword light. Not only could it block the wind blade, it could even block its own sharp claws. However, this small sword did not seem to be that simple. Just from seeing that it had pierced through the Blood Wolf King's head like tofu, it did not dare to rashly try. Sure enough, when the chasing dream came close, the Blood Wolf King did not use its front claws to block it. Instead, it twisted its body and that thick tail was like a huge shadow. With a paw sound, it slapped the small sword from top to bottom. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua slightly frowned. After seeing the Blood Wolf King's sturdy claws, she did not dare to be too careless. With a slight movement of her fingers, the small sword suddenly stopped in the air. Then the tip of the sword went up and with a so sound, it met the Blood Wolf King's tail. Bang! A muffled sound rang out as the two collided. Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense was shaken, and the small sword was almost out of control. It swayed and fell to the ground. The Blood Wolf King also let out a low growl, and a few drops of blood dripped from its tail. It seemed to have suffered a minor injury. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and secretly said, "This Blood Wolf King is indeed not ordinary. Since the chasing dream made its move, other than being caught due to its lack of power, this is the first time it has been struck down by force. What should I do?" Zhang Xiaohua could not go against the Blood Wolf King again. However, right after, Zhang Xiaohua's fingers moved again. The chasing dream jumped up from the dust and directly pierced towards the Blood Wolf King's throat. The Blood Wolf King did not dare to hesitate. Since its tail was pierced by the small sword, it could not be careless about the vital point of its throat. The Blood Wolf King twisted its body and opened its mouth. Whoosh! Another wind blade was spat out. Zhang Xiaohua also secretly nodded. Previously, they had been testing each other for a long time. Ordinary moves were not effective. At this time, they could only compete with each other's divine sense. Thus, Zhang Xiaohua also focused. She poured her divine sense into the small sword and faced the wind blade head-on. Poof! The small sword seemed to have pierced into a ball of soft cotton. It did not exert any force. Zhang Xiaohua urged her divine sense and pushed the small sword forward a little. The Blood Wolf King was also stunned. It opened its mouth and shot out another wind blade. The chasing dream could not withstand it and was pushed back in an instant. Zhang Xiaohua pointed her finger, and the small sword turned around to get rid of the wind blade. Then it dived into the Blood Wolf King's mouth and stabbed again. Seeing that the wind blade was effective, the Blood Wolf King was no longer nervous and spat out 2 wind blades in a row. Damn! Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. Before she could command the small sword to change the angle, the Blood Wolf King also raised its head and shot out 3 wind blades in a row from different angles to block Zhang Xiaohua's escape route. The 3 wind blades were directly aimed at different vital points on Zhang Xiaohua's body. The one who strikes first gains the advantage. Even the Blood Wolf King understood this principle. Huh. Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. Was the Blood Wolf King a human or a beast? It actually knew the art of war? However, he was confident that he could dodge the attack. He leaped into the air, but before he could stabilize himself in the air, the Blood Wolf King launched a few more wind blades at him. The wind blades were aimed at several vital points on his body without any hesitation. It can't be. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. He had forgotten that he was in the air, exposing all the vital points on his body. Wouldn't that make him a moving target? Seeing the wind blades flying towards him, Zhang Xiaohua did not care about the elegance of a peerless expert and somersaulted down. The Blood Wolf King took advantage of the situation and became even more unreasonable. Puff, puff, puff. Another 3 wind blades were shot at the place where Zhang Xiaohua landed, blocking Zhang Xiaohua's escape route. Then the Blood Wolf King raised its head and roared, opening its mouth wide. Whoosh! The wind blades were bigger than the previous ones, and they were shot towards Zhang Xiaohua's chest. This guy is really vicious and merciless. No wonder he's a king. Zhang Xiaohua was in the air, looking at the wind blades coming from above and below. His heart was slightly flustered. Most of his previous opponents were martial artists. The martial arts that Zhang Xiaohua had learned were more than enough. If it did not work, he could use his strength to subdue his opponents. Moreover, the divine powers that he had learned for the time being were unfathomable. He had an advantage in battle. Even when he met Huang Feng not long ago, he only relied on his speed and claws to tear his throat. He did not use any other techniques. Now that he saw the Blood Wolf King's ability, Zhang Xiaohua understood that there was always someone better than him in this world. Huang Feng was not without powerful techniques, but because she was pregnant with little Martin, she did not want to harm her body too much. Therefore, she frequently used simple claws. If Huang Feng knew how to use wind blades, he would have died long ago. The water in Jianghu was really deep. In a flash, Zhang Xiaohua thought a lot, but he still had to dodge the wind blades in front of him. He moved his body and breathed, circulating the little amount of true qi in his meridians smoothly. His divine sense carefully identified the speed and gaps of the wind blades. In almost impossible places, he moved his body several times to avoid them. When the wind blades flew past, Zhang Xiaohua's body was already covered in cold sweat. It's all thanks to Yellow Wind. Under its relentless pursuit these past few days, my Imperial Wind technique has really made great progress. Not to mention other things, just the control of my movements has become much more precise. This Blood Wolf King is really despicable. Xiaoxia had just dodged, but it did not rest and shot out another wind blade. Do you not need to pay for these wind blades? Fortunately, at this time, he was close to the ground. Helpless, Zhang Xiaohua plunged into the ground. However, just as he entered the ground, Zhang Xiaohua felt that something was wrong. He had escaped, but what about second brother and Chang'e? He did not have much time to think and immediately escaped. Sure enough, when the Blood Wolf King saw Zhang Xiaohua avoid the battle, it immediately shot a wind blade at Zhang Xiaohu. Zhang Xiaohua panicked. But no matter how fast he was, he couldn't be faster than the wind blade. He watched as the wind blade flew over. Inside the restriction, Zhang Xiaohu did not know the danger inside, nor did he know that the wind blade was shot at him. He only saw the Blood Wolf King opening his mouth and yawning. His brother inexplicably popped out of the ground and looked at him nervously. Did something happen here? Suddenly, just around Zhang Xiaohu, there was a slight shake, and even some light blue brilliance flashed. About 4 feet around him, there were some ripples. What is this? Zhang Xiaohu was puzzled. In the distance, Zhang Xiaohua saw that the restriction was not broken by the Blood Wolf King's wind blades, and his heart was slightly relieved. However, even if it could not be broken once, it did not mean that it could not be broken many times. The Heaven and Earth Yuan Qi in the Jade Talisman was limited, and could not be replenished by the Heaven and Earth Yuan Qi. As long as the Blood Wolf King attacked repeatedly, it was bound to be broken. Zhang Xiaohua knew that from this moment on, he could no longer hide and could only face the difficulties head-on. Shortly after, Zhang Xiaohua took out a jade talisman from her bosom and gently crushed it. A light green protective barrier immediately enveloped Zhang Xiaohua's entire body. This was the first time Zhang Xiaohua had used a defensive jade talisman on herself. By the time Zhang Xiaohua crushed the jade talisman, the Blood Wolf King's wind blades were already flying towards her. Chapter 674. Seeing how ruthless the Blood Wolf King was, Zhang Xiaohua's eyes flashed with ruthlessness. Just now he had killed too many Blood Wolf Kings, so he couldn't help but feel compassion. But now that the wind blades were constantly shooting at the protective barrier, the barrier was getting thinner and thinner. He knew that today was not the day to be kind. Letting go of the Blood Wolf King's wishful thinking would only bring disaster to himself. Therefore he laughed and said, "The Blood Wolf King is only a so-so. Do you think I only have one jade talisman?" Then he took out another jade talisman and gently crushed it to strengthen the protective barrier. Then, another jade talisman appeared in his hand. It was Zhang Xiaohua's best weapon, the dragon binding ring. Now that Zhang Xiaohua had a defensive barrier, he temporarily ignored the Blood Wolf King's wind blades. He threw the dragon binding ring in his hand into the air. The dragon binding ring grew in the wind until it was the same size as the Blood Wolf King. Inside the protective shield, Zhang Xiaohua secretly wiped the cold sweat on his forehead. Alas, fortunately, the Blood Wolf King is not that big. If it were bigger, my Zhenqi would not be enough. Zhang Xiaohua rested for a moment and pointed his finger again. The dragon binding ring silently flew towards the Blood Wolf King. When the Blood Wolf King saw Zhang Xiaohua throwing out the dragon binding ring, it was shocked. While it was shooting wind blades at Zhang Xiaohua, it also spat a few mouthfuls of qi at the dragon binding ring. However, Zhang Xiaohua controlled the dragon binding ring to not collide with the wind blades, so the wind blades missed. Seeing the dragon binding ring flying closer, the Blood Wolf King panicked. It sent out a few more wind blades, but they were like clay oxen entering the sea. It quickly dodged to the side. Unfortunately, the dragon binding ring was like a maggot. No matter how it dodged, it was steadily aimed at its head. The Blood Wolf King was even more panicked. With a low roar, it leaped into the air and ran straight into the wolf pack. The wolves received the order from the Blood Wolf King and started to run. For a moment, the entire slope was in chaos. The Blood Wolf King actually wanted to take advantage of the chaos to escape. Damn, Zhang Xiaohua laughed. It was really shameful for the Blood Wolf King's wolf character. If it was too late, it would attack with all its might. But if it couldn't win, it would immediately escape. It even used its own subordinates as cover. However, the Blood Wolf King actually used wind blades to attack Zhang Xiaohu. This made Zhang Xiaohua very angry, since she already had the intention to kill it. How could she let it go? Zhang Xiaohua's figure flew straight to the place where the Blood Wolf King disappeared. Although the Blood Wolf King's escape speed was extremely fast, Zhang Xiaohua cultivated the Imperial Wind technique while being chased by the Yellow Wind. It was naturally easy to deal with it now. When Zhang Xiaohua found the Blood Wolf King covered by the pack of wolves, she couldn't help but become angrier. The Blood Wolf King was really vicious. It seemed that it didn't give up and actually quietly moved towards Zhang Xiaohu's direction. Zhang Xiaohua gritted her teeth and flew to Zhang Xiaohu's side, blocking the Blood Wolf King's path. The Blood Wolf King saw that its plot was exposed and growled. The pack of wolves received the order and rushed towards Zhang Xiaohua. As for the Blood Wolf King itself, it turned around and wanted to escape. How could Zhang Xiaohua let it go? She stretched out her hand and took out a few light red jade talismans. She shook her hand and shot them at the Blood Wolf King. Unfortunately, the Blood Wolf King dodged and all of the jade talismans missed and hit the other wolves. A faint fire appeared and several wolves cried out in pain. For a moment, the scene became even more chaotic. Some of the smarter wolves quickly lay down on the ground and tried to extinguish the fire. However, they couldn't do so no matter how hard they tried. The burning wolves fled and passed the fire to the wolves next to them. Not long after, many of the wolves were caught in the fire. The wolves that were on fire earlier screamed miserably as they were burned to death by the fire. The rest of the wolves were even crazier. Seeing this scene, they immediately retreated and distanced themselves from the burning wolves. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua didn't have the time to watch the development of the situation. He didn't dare to use the fire talisman because he was afraid that it would cause the wolves to panic and lead the fire to the Yulon Prairie. Since he had already used it, he needed to quickly get rid of the Blood Wolf King, and then deal with the aftermath. The retreat of the wolves also gave Zhang Xiaohua some convenience. The order of the Blood Wolf King couldn't be heard by the frenzied wolves. Zhang Xiaohua could easily see the Blood Wolf King fleeing in a hurry. With a low whistle, Zhang Xiaohua activated the Imperial Wind technique and rushed to the top of the Blood Wolf King. With a wave of her hand, the dragon binding ring fell from the sky. This was a high slope. Without the help of the wolves, even if the Blood Wolf King fled, it couldn't outrun the speed of the spiritual sense. After a while, the dragon binding ring was firmly wrapped around the Blood Wolf King's neck. Zhang Xiaohua didn't delay and formed a hand seal. The dragon binding ring was large but small, tightly wrapped around the Blood Wolf King's neck. Then he ruthlessly pointed with his hand. With a light kacha sound, the Blood Wolf King's neck was immediately broken by the dragon binding ring. A stream of blood flowed out from the Blood Wolf King's mouth, and it immediately died on the spot. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua also fell from the sky. The dragon binding ring consumed too much spiritual sense and Jin Qi. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to use it because he was afraid that even if he killed the Bloodwolf King, his body would run out of Jin Qi. Then, wouldn't he die in the mouths of the wolves? Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He reluctantly used his remaining Jin Qi to escape into the ground. With 2 primordial stones in his hand, he quickly recovered his Jin Qi. However, before he could escape into the ground, the remaining Jin Qi in his meridians wasn't enough to support the escape technique. The hard ground forced him out of the ground. Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. He looked around and saw that the surrounding bloodwolves were still in a mess and didn't notice him. He quickly hid in a bush and lay there to absorb Jin Qi. After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the Jin Qi in his meridians was replenished. Only then did Zhang Xiaohua's heart feel at ease. Worried about his second brother's situation, he didn't dare to stay any longer and quickly got up. Looking at the Bloodwolf King that was strangled to death by the dragon binding ring, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. Fortunately, he had successfully refined the dragon binding ring before coming to the Valley Orchid Dusk. Otherwise, even if he could escape today, his second brother and Chang'e would be in trouble. Thinking about the yellow wind, that was even more powerful than the Bloodwolf King, Zhang Xiaohua truly knew that he was dancing on the tip of a knife a few days ago. Then, Zhang Xiaohua patted Little Black who was sleeping in his arms and said with a smile, "It's all thanks to you, little guy. Otherwise, this young master would have already become a wandering soul under your mother's claws. If I don't treat you well in the future, wouldn't I be letting you down?" Zhang Xiaohua walked to the Bloodwolf King's corpse and bent down to pick up the corpse that was even taller than himself. He walked up the high slope in large strides, and when he reached the highest point, he looked around. Fortunately, although the Yuan Qi in the Valley Orchid was abundant, it wasn't enough to support the flames. After the remaining bloodwolves were burned to death for 2 minutes, the flames no longer spread outside. At this moment, the bloodwolves were somewhat scattered, but they still circled around in 2s and 3s. They didn't go far, and were probably waiting for the Bloodwolf King's orders. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua raised his hand and raised the Bloodwolf King's corpse above his head. He opened his mouth and let out a long howl. The sound shook the surroundings and attracted all the bloodwolves that were still alive. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua raise the Bloodwolf King's corpse, the eyes of the bloodwolves couldn't help but reveal fear. Zhang Xiaohua didn't waste time with them and shouted loudly, "Hey! If you don't leave now, when will you?" All the bloodwolves' forelegs trembled, and they immediately clamped their tails. Like dogs that had lost a fight, they were about to disperse. At this moment, suddenly not far away, a bloodwolf let out a low howl. It raised its head to look at Zhang Xiaohua and the Bloodwolf King's corpse in his hands and slowly ran up the high slope. "What is this?" Zhang Xiaohua was shocked. He immediately took out the jade water sword from his bosom and stared at the bloodwolf that was running over. The bloodwolf ran to the front, but it didn't move forward. It only bent its body, bent its legs, and slightly lowered its head. The surrounding bloodwolves also listened and obediently stood there. Zhang Xiaohua was very puzzled. What is this? For a moment, one person and one wolf stood there in silence. After the time it took to smoke a cigarette, the bloodwolf remained in the same position and didn't change. Even the surrounding bloodwolves quietly stood there without moving, as if they were waiting for something. Zhang Xiaohua scratched his head and whispered, "Brother Wolf, what are you playing at? What do you mean by this? I really don't understand." When the bloodwolf heard Zhang Xiaohua's words, it unconsciously raised its head and quietly looked at Zhang Xiaohua. There was no other expression in its eyes except for a faint trace of expectation and a trace of fear. Zhang Xiaohua took a step forward. The bloodwolf crouched and involuntarily took half a step back. However, it quickly lowered its head and took a step forward. "Sigh, it said that skills don't weigh on one's body. I should learn the beast language again. Otherwise, communication won't be so troublesome." Zhang Xiaohua was speechless. Seeing that the bloodwolf didn't seem to have any evil intentions, she thought for a moment, and threw the Bloodwolf King's corpse in front of it. "Brother Wolf, do you want to take your Bloodwolf King back and bury it?" The bloodwolf naturally didn't reply. However, when it saw Zhang Xiaohua throw the Bloodwolf King to the ground, its eyes revealed joy. It stepped forward and bit the Bloodwolf King's neck. Blood immediately flowed into the Bloodwolf King's mouth. The Bloodwolf King didn't hesitate and immediately drank until the wound on its neck stopped bleeding. Then, it threw the Bloodwolf King's corpse away and walked to Zhang Xiaohua's side. It half-squatted and raised its head to howl. This howl was very different from the previous one. There was a bit of the Bloodwolf King's aura in the howl. When the surrounding wolves heard the howls of the blood wolves, they all revealed joyous expressions and howled towards the sky. The simultaneous howls of several hundred blood wolves spread far and wide across the vast grassland. Even the floating clouds in the sky changed color. Chapter 675. Seeing the behavior of the wolves, Zhang Xiaohua was somewhat enlightened, but he was also somewhat apprehensive. At this time, he understood that this pack of blood wolves must have a king to guide them. Otherwise, the pack of wolves may disperse or be eaten by other fierce beasts. Their inheritance of the king should be the way that Blood Wolf drank the blood of the Blood Wolf King. Well, maybe this was just a superficial phenomenon, and he didn't know the truth. But today, the Blood Wolf King was killed by him. Seeing that the throne of the Blood Wolves was about to be lost, this Blood Wolf King bravely stepped forward and came to him at the risk of being killed by him, hoping that he would return the throne to them. For the sake of the entire wolf pack, the Blood Wolf King was actually willing to sacrifice his own life. Zhang Xiaohua unconsciously looked at the Blood Wolf King in a new light. But what made him apprehensive was whether the Blood Wolf King, who had just inherited the throne, would continue to follow the will of the previous Blood Wolf King and attack him. Soon, the new Blood Wolf King immediately expressed its stance. After it led the wolf pack to howl, it immediately squatted down and placed its head under Zhang Xiaohua's hand. Then it used its head to slowly nudge against Zhang Xiaohua's hand. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. This was similar to the performance of the lazy dog in the Guozhuang house. Zhang Xiaohua naturally stroked its head and said, "Brother Wolf, congratulations on obtaining the throne. But I'm very sorry, I don't have any meat bones here, so I can't celebrate with you. Please forgive me." How could the new Blood Wolf King understand? When it saw Zhang Xiaohua stroking its head, it was very happy and proud. The surrounding wolves also seemed to be envious and let out a low growl. Suddenly, the new Blood Wolf King's face changed. Its nose twitched a few times and its face became even more respectful. It turned its head and sniffed Zhang Xiaohua's chest. Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. She thought that it was being naughty. She waved her hand and smiled. "Do you want to find a place to sleep like Little Black?" However, the new Blood Wolf King still put his nose on Zhang Xiaohua's chest, and even used his mouth to enter Zhang Xiaohua's bosom. Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. She put her hand into her bosom, and immediately understood. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile as he carried little Martin out. At this moment, little Martin's eyes were still closed, and he did not care about the outside world. However, when Zhang Xiaohua carried little Martin out, the new Blood Wolf King immediately revealed a look of fear and respect as it quickly prostrated itself on the ground. The surrounding blood wolves were also half fearful and half respectful. They bent their forelegs and bent their bodies as if they were paying respects to their queen. Damn, Zhang Xiaohua was dumbfounded. If she knew that Little Black was so powerful when it was sleeping, she would have taken it out earlier. She had been so tired and worried for nothing. The wolves had been paying respects to Little Black for a long time. Naturally, Little Black ignored them. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she said, "New brother wolf, this child is still young and can't pay attention to you. When it grows up, you can pay respects to it." After that, she put Little Black back into her bosom. The new Blood Wolf King only dared to raise his head when he smelled little Martin's breath. However, he still did not dare to stand up. He crouched down and crawled in front of Zhang Xiaohua. He used his head to nod behind her. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua understood. This action was similar to what Huan Huan did at the beginning. It meant that she was going to ride on it. However, this glory belonged to Little Black, and she was just basking in its glory. Hence, Zhang Xiaohua did not stand on ceremony and rode on it. When the Blood Wolf King saw these people riding on it, it was very excited. It stood up and slowly carried Zhang Xiaohua down the slope. Seeing this scene, the entire wolf pack howled as if this was a supreme glory. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua could not be thick-skinned anymore. She took out Little Black and hugged it in front of her chest. Thus, the wolf pack became even more excited. The Blood Wolf King carried them down the slope and turned around a few times before walking towards Zhang Xiaohu's direction. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohu was completely stunned. He was even more shocked than when he saw Zhang Xiaohua descending from the sky. These were blood wolves that ate people without spitting out their bones. However, they were as docile as the mangy dogs in the Guozhuang house. Oh, they were even more docile than mangy dogs. At least when they had no bones, mangy dogs would ignore you. Walking to Zhang Xiaohu's side, Zhang Xiaohua jumped down and smiled at the Bloodwolf King. Well, you also worked hard. You should go back and reorganize your team. I think you also have a long way to go. I killed a lot of these blood wolves. The Bloodwolf King let out a low howl and circled around Zhang Xiaohua, but it didn't leave. It actually crouched down in the grass nearby. The pack of wolves behind it did the same. They were leisurely circling around in the same place, not in a hurry. This Zhang Xiaohua was somewhat helpless. She really did not know what they meant. Looking at Zhang Xiaohu was also looking at her. Zhang Xiaohua said, "Second brother, don't look at me. I also don't know what they are doing. My matter can be dealt with later. First, let's take a look at your injuries." Zhang Xiaohu nodded and said, "All right. Anyway, looking at their appearance, they seem harmless. Let them stay. Oh, don't look at me first. If you want to look, you have to look at Chang'e first." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Second sister-in-law's injuries. When I came here, I have already seen it. There is no danger to her life. You can rest assured. But just now you fought for a while. I still don't know the situation in your body. Let's take a look at you first." Zhang Xiaohu said embarrassedly. I don't know what you saw. This second sister-in-law seems to be a little early. If you shout now, only the two of us can hear it. When Chang'e wakes up, don't talk nonsense." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "I naturally saw what I should see. As for what I shouldn't see, I didn't see it at all. Second brother, you can rest assured." After that, she grabbed Zhang Xiaohu's wrist. First, she looked at his pulse, then she transferred a strand of true qi into his meridians. After a round of inspection, Zhang Xiaohua frowned slightly. Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohu's heart thumped. Then he comforted. "Xiaohua, is it very serious? It doesn't matter if you don't know how to treat it. Wait until we return to Shixing Peak." Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, "It is a bit serious. Just now some flesh was bitten off by the blood wolf and a lot of blood flowed out. Moreover, there are some internal injuries in my body. It seems to be an old injury from before. The meridians in my body are somewhat atrophied. It should be caused by my exhaustion just now." Ha! Zhang Xiaohu was surprised. "Xiaohua, why do you say the same thing as the doctor in the hall? Your words are clear and logical. This internal injury was caused in the Misty Mountain Villa. There has been no medicine to treat it, so I kept it." Then he sighed. "Now many of the brothers in the hall are injured. The medicine provided by the fragrant religion is not enough. This time, Hall Master Yang asked the sect leader for permission to let us come to the Yulon Grand Canyon to collect herbs for alchemy." "Oh, so that's how it is." Zhang Xiaohua understood and suddenly asked, "By the way, what about Captain He? Is he also at Shixing Peak?" "Itianshu?" Zhang Xiaohu did not expect Zhang Xiaohua to ask so suddenly. He hesitated. "Well, he is at Shixing Peak." Then he changed the topic. "Not only Captain He, Marshal Uncle Shui, Marshal Uncle Wen, Marshal Uncle Lu and the others are also at Shixing Peak." "Ha ha." Zhang Xiaohua was overjoyed. "I was worried about them. It turns out that they are still alive. Hee, are they all well?" "Well, they are all well." Zhang Xiaohu hesitated and said, "By the way, do you have the blood replenishing pill of the fragrant religion? If you have it, give me one. Oh, if you have two, give me one and keep the other one for Chang'e." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and took out a bottle from her arms. She threw it to Zhang Xiaohu and said, "There are only 4 pills. I will give them all to you. It's hard for you to remember second sister-in-law. Ha ha ha." Zhang Xiaohu smiled and opened the jade bottle. He poured out 1 pill. but he frowned when he smelled the medicine. He turned his head and said, Xiaohua, this doesn't seem to be the blood-replenishing pill. I have seen the blood-replenishing pill of the fragrant religion. It is different from this one. Zhang Xiaohua nodded. Of course, this is not the blood-replenishing pill. This is the Yuhuandan pill. You have internal injuries, so it is better to take the Yuhuandan pill. What? Yuhuandan pill? Zhang Xiaohu was stunned. His hands trembled, and he almost dropped the jade bottle on the ground. He cried out in amazement. This is the legendary Yuhuandan pill, used by the inner disciples of the fragrant religion peak? Zhang Xiaohua secretly laughed and said, Second brother, look at how surprised you are. Don't say that you are my second brother in the future. It is just the Yuhuandan pill. For the time being, there are only 4 pills. Maybe there will be more in the future. You take it first. I will help second sister-in-law connect her wound to her broken arm, and then you can help her take it. This Zhang Xiaohu looked at the Yuhuandan pill in his hand and thought for a while. He said awkwardly, Xiaohua, do you have any blood-replenishing pills? My injuries are not serious, so don't waste the precious pills. You should keep it for yourself. After hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua thought of Nie Qinyu and thought, people who care about themselves are indeed different from others. If it was someone else, they would have taken it even if they were not convinced. She immediately shook her head. I have no use for this. Second brother, you should take it quickly. If you don't need it, I will keep it for master. What happened to Hero One? Zhang Xiaohua asked curiously. She then thought of the news she heard earlier and asked carefully, Is it because of your internal strength? Zhang Xiaohu nodded sadly. That is one thing. The main thing is that your internal injuries are more serious than mine. It has been so many years. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said, Yes, don't you have 4 pills? You can keep one for master. But there is still master's Junior Lu. She saved you and big brother. Before Zhang Xiaohua felt a lump in her throat. Chapter 676. Zhang Xiaohua's nose twitched, and then she said seriously, Second brother, don't worry. I'll take care of it. I'll give you enough Yuhuandan pill. You should take it now. You're my second brother. If I don't give you any pills, I'll be in vain. Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, That's what you said. I'm convinced. Zhang Xiaohua also smiled and said, Take it. Take it as much as you want. As long as you keep the one for second sister-in-law, you can take the other 3. It doesn't matter. Then Zhang Xiaohua's heart flashed and he instructed, I don't have that many pills on hand right now. I'll give them to you when we get back. But you can't say that I gave them to you. Huh? Why? Zhang Xiaohu asked curiously. I have my own plan. Don't ask so much. Zhang Xiaohua made a mysterious face. Zhang Xiaohu had no choice but to hold up the Yuhuandan pill and said, I'm convinced. Just take it. No one is stopping you. Zhang Xiaohua rolled her eyes grumpily. She bent over and sat beside Chang'e. After taking Chang'e's pulse and checking her meridians with genuine qi, Zhang Xiaohua had a plan. She turned to Zhang Xiaohu, who had taken the Yuhuandan pill, and said, Second brother, although second sister-in-law fainted, she just lost too much blood. She didn't have any internal injuries, and her meridians are still stable. You don't have to take the Yuhuandan pill. I still have the blood-replenishing pill. She'll be fine after taking it. Zhang Xiaohu was unhappy when he heard that. He said angrily, Look at you. You just said that you'd give your second sister-in-law the Yuhuandan pill. Why do you change your mind now? No. As he spoke, he walked in front of Chang'e and squatted down. He supported Chang'e's upper body and poured a jade rejuvenation pill into Chang'e's mouth. Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, Isn't she called Chang'e? Why are you calling her second sister-in-law now? Zhang Xiaohu blushed. It was a slip of the tongue. Then, with a straight face, she said, Why aren't you setting your elder sister Chang'e's bones? Do you want her to wake up and beg you? I wouldn't dare. Zhang Xiaohua stuck out her tongue. He hit all of Chang'e's major acupoints with his fingers and skillfully reconnected Chang'e's arm. Then he cut a few straight planks from a big tree in the distance to fix Chang'e's arm. At this time, Zhang Xiaohu sighed and said, I heard that the fragrant religion has a kind of small bone-congealing pill that can heal bones. When we go back, I will ask the hall master to get some from the inner disciples. Oh, that's right. Zhang Xiaohua slapped his forehead. He had forgotten about this. She then took out a jade bottle from her bosom and poured out a pill. Second brother, help second sister-in-law feed it. Huh. Zhang Xiaohu was very surprised. He looked at Zhang Xiaohua's bosom and said in amazement, Xiaohua, could it be that you have 100 treasures pouch in your bosom? You can have anything I say? You actually have a small bone-congealing pill with you? Zhang Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She said, this isn't a small bone-congealing pill. This is a genuine bone-congealing pill. A genuine bone-congealing pill? Zhang Xiaohu couldn't believe it. He took it and sniffed it. He shook his head and said, if you said it was a Yuhuandan pill, I would have believed it. Lingering fragrance peak has it. The bone-congealing pill has been lost in the fragrant religion for a long time. Where did you get it? Moreover, this pill doesn't have any medicinal smell. How can it be a pill? Your second brother is very smart. You can't fool him. It's up to you whether you want it or not. You still dare to doubt it. Zhang Xiaohua made a move to snatch the pill back. Zhang Xiaohu dodged and said with a smile, it's a good deal. I don't believe that you're using a fake pill to fool your second. Ahem, your elder sister Chang'e. After he finished speaking, he helped Chang'e feed the pill. Zhang Xiaohua took out some pills to stop bleeding and give them to Zhang Xiaohu. She helped him apply them externally and let him do the same for Chang'e. Only then did she feel completely relieved. She unsealed the sealed acupoints on Chang'e's body. The Yuhuandan pill and bone-congealing pill were really miraculous. In just a moment, the medicine took effect. Chang'e's pale face was already slightly red. Zhang Xiaohu also nodded and said, my body is warm and really comfortable. The wound almost doesn't hurt anymore. At this time, the setting sun was still shining dazzlingly and refused to set. Zhang Xiaohua also felt warm in her heart. Zhang Xiaohu asked again, by the way, Xiaohua, how did you know we were here? We were so far away. Before he finished his words, Zhang Xiaohua jumped up and shouted, oh, second brother, I've been talking to you so much that I've forgotten about Chen Chen. Zhang Xiaohu was also shocked. You met Chen Chen? Where is she? Is she okay? Zhang Xiaohua hurriedly said, she was fine just now. Now she should be fine. After that, she was about to fly away, but her eyes caught the Blood Wolf King and she immediately waved to it. The Blood Wolf King saw this and jumped up happily. Zhang Xiaohua flew up and patted its head as if she was patting Huan Huan. The Blood Wolf King was stunned, but it knew what Zhang Xiaohua meant. It growled and quickly walked in the direction indicated by Zhang Xiaohua. Dozens of blood wolves around it immediately stood up and followed it. The other blood wolves still stayed quietly in their original places. The Blood Wolf King ran very fast. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, it arrived at the edge of the wild forest. When it arrived, it did not wait for Zhang Xiaohua's order, and immediately rushed into the forest as if it had smelled something. Before Chen Chen's location, Zhang Xiaohua saw a lot of black beasts in front of them. Zhang Xiaohua's heart skipped a beat, thinking that this was bad. Could it be that Chen Chen had met with some mishap? However, he immediately felt that it could not be. Although he had left in a hurry, he had set up the restrictions. There was no reason for a beast to break through the restrictions. Could it be that another beast like the Blood Wolf King had appeared? But when she got closer, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but be stunned. She saw that in the middle of the beasts, Chen Chen was sitting in the circle that Zhang Xiaohua had drawn. Her beautiful face was pale and her lips were trembling. She held the black puppy in one hand and kept stroking the black puppy's back with the other to get rid of her fear. However, the terrified Chen Chen completely forgot to look at the expressions and postures of the surrounding beasts. They were all prostrating on the ground, showing respect to a king. Seeing the appearance of the beasts and the black puppy in Chen Chen's hand, Zhang Xiaohua understood the reason. She jumped down from the Blood Wolf King's back. The Blood Wolf King also quickly fell to the ground and respectfully bowed to the black puppy. When Chen Chen saw Zhang Xiaohua appear, it was as if she had seen her savior. She stood up at once and rushed forward. Thinking of Zhang Xiaohua's instructions, she did not dare to go out of the circle and looked anxious. Zhang Xiaohua walked closer and took the jade talismans. She smiled and said, "Don't worry, senior sister Chen Chen. It's all over now." "Really?" Chen Chen said in surprise. "Senior brother and senior sister are all right." Zhang Xiaohua shook her head and said, "Of course." As if seeing Zhang Xiaohua in the martial arts exhibition, Chen Chen laughed out loud. Then she looked around timidly and pulled Zhang Xiaohua's sleeve and said, "Zhang Xiaohua, after you left for a while, these beasts came and scared me to death. Hee, your circle is really useful. They don't dare to cross it at all. You are getting more and more powerful. You are really great." Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly and thought, "Although my restriction is useful, it's not as good as Little Black's." However, he could not tell her and only smiled. "It's good that you know. I've always been low-key. Don't tell others." He. Chen Chen laughed again and said, I won't. Well, let's go and see second brother and the others." After that, she called a blood wolf and let Chen Chen ride it. How could Chen Chen dare to ride it? She had been chased by a blood wolf for a long time, and even saw a senior brother being eaten by a blood wolf. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and jumped on the blood wolf king. She said, "If you don't get on, I'll leave. Now you're out of the circle and don't have my protection." Chen Chen heard this and jumped on the back of a blood wolf. 2 blood wolves roared and carried the 2 of them back to the high slope. All the other beasts also ran behind them. Seeing another group of beasts coming from afar, Zhang Xiaohu was anxious. Before he could react, he saw Zhang Xiaohua and Chen Chen riding a blood wolf in front of him. Only then did he feel relieved. "Senior brother, what happened to senior sister?" Chen Chen jumped off the blood wolf's back and tears fell down. He went straight to Chang'e. Zhang Xiaohu smiled and said, "It's okay. She just took the elixir and is sleeping now. I think she'll wake up tomorrow morning." "Elixir?" Chen Chen was stunned and said, "Where did we get the elixir from?" But then he woke up and looked at Zhang Xiaohua. He said, "Thank you, Zhang Xiaohua." "Damn," Zhang Xiaohua secretly said. "How can I not save my own sister-in-law? How can I let an outsider like you thank me?" Zhang Xiaohua looked up at the sky and said, "Second brother, it's not early anymore. Let's find a place to rest. If you didn't bring a tent, you can only find a cave." Second, before she could say the words second sister-in-law, Zhang Xiaohu stared at her and she could only say, "Sister Chang'e just took the elixir. We have to find a suitable place." Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and pointed to a small mountain in the distance. He said, "That's where we rested last night. But it's a little far. Isn't it inconvenient?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "It's not inconvenient at all. As long as you can carry Sister Chang'e, it's fine." After saying that, little Martin escaped from his arms and walked to a mammoth. When the mammoth saw little Martin, it immediately bent its limbs. Zhang Xiaohua patted its head and turned to say, "Second brother, you carry Sister Chang'e. Sister Chang'e will sit on this big guy. Oh, Chen Chen and I will ride the blood wolf." Zhang Xiaohu was naturally happy. He carefully carried Chang'e and jumped on the mammoth's back. Chen Chen didn't dare to ride the blood wolf and had to find an elephant to ride. Zhang Xiaohua was still riding the blood wolf king. The 4 of them went straight to the small mountain in front of them with a fierce beast. Chapter 677. Of course. Chang'e pursed her lips and smiled. Actually, as Chen Chen said just now, your second brother's internal strength should be more than 30 years, but his real internal strength is only 20 years. This is what I was puzzled about. Of course, this situation also shows that as long as Xiaohu works hard, the difference of 10 years can be achieved very quickly. In other words, my second brother doesn't need to spend another 10 years of hard work to achieve the internal strength that other people need 10 years to achieve? That should be the case. Chang'e nodded. Zhang Xiaohua pondered for a moment and asked, "Then what if my second brother gains another 30 years of internal strength?" "Ah. What? This? How is this possible?" The 3 of them were very surprised and cried out at the same time. Chang'e opened her eyes wide and said, "Xiaohua, the thing you gave Xiaohu, is it the legendary magical pill that increases internal strength?" Do you have the same kind of pill? Then, without waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to nod, she explained, maybe you don't know, this kind of pill that increases internal strength, although it's good, seems to be very harmful to the meridians. Think about it, it's a narrow road for a person to walk on. If you suddenly let 3 rows of carriages walk side by side, there will definitely be a big problem. I think that the signs of Xiaohu's qi deviation just now are because his meridians can't adapt to the huge amount of internal strength. Then doesn't that mean that no one dares to take the pill that increases internal strength? Zhang Xiaohua knew that Chang'e's guess was wrong, but she still asked curiously. This situation is also because your second brother has just started cultivating inner force. If he has been cultivating for a long time, like our Misty sect leader O, which one of them hasn't been immersed in inner force for decades? Their meridians have been tempered to be incomparably tough. This sudden increase in inner force makes it easier to control. Oh, so it's like that. Zhang Xiaohua somewhat understood. Of course, his heart was more at ease. What was the meridian nourishing pill for? It was to nourish the meridians and temper the meridians. Zhang Xiaohu had taken the soothing meridians pill, so the meridians in his body were definitely comparable to those of experts who had cultivated for decades. Then Chang'e said, there's another problem. Each kind of elixir is only effective for the first time. If you continue to take it, the effect will be greatly reduced. I estimate that if you give the same elixir to Xiaohu, it will definitely not increase his power by more than 10 years. At most, it will increase his power by 3 to 5 years. Zhang Xiaohua was still unwilling to give up and asked, then what if it's a different type of pill? This? Chang'e looked at Zhang Xiaohua as if he was looking at a monster. In Jianghu, he had only heard of the elixir that could increase power, but had never seen it. Even in the Misty School, he used to pick up the licorice roots from the secret site and refine some elixirs that could increase power by a little. But this was not something that Chang'e could know. Moreover, as long as one could get this kind of elixir, he didn't know how much virtue he had accumulated in his previous life. When Chang'e saw that Zhang Xiaohu's power suddenly increased by more than 10 years, of course, he thought that Zhang Xiaohua only had one elixir. Then Zhang Xiaohua asked again, and Chang'e naturally thought that maybe there were 2 elixirs. This possibility had reached the limit of Chang'e's imagination. At this time, when he heard that there was another kind of elixir that could increase power, Chang'e almost thought that he was dreaming, or that Zhang Xiaohua was joking. Although Chen Chen's kung fu was not as good as Chang'e's, and her knowledge was not as good as Chang'e's, she had heard about this kind of magical elixir. At this time, she unconsciously curled her lips and said, Zhang Xiaohua, you really know how to brag. Zhang Xiaohua laughed. When he was about to speak, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. He thought of the joke Zhang Xiaohua made yesterday. Sword Radiance. Sword Radiance was not something that could be done with more than 20 years of power. Since Zhang Xiaohua said so yesterday, could it be? Zhang Xiaohua looked at his second brother, his future second sister-in-law, and then at the petite and dainty Chen Chen, who had a look of disbelief on her face. Zhang Xiaohua smiled. If they could not be trusted, then who else in this world could be trusted? So, Zhang Xiaohua nodded with a smile. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's affirmative action, Chang'e almost felt that all his cognition was about to change. Everything could happen to this child in his impression. Well, she somewhat forgot that yesterday before she fainted, she saw the immortal falling from the sky. Ew. Do you really have other elixirs that can increase one's power? Even Chen Chen felt that her mouth and tongue were dry, and still asked in disbelief. Zhang Xiaohua raised her chin and somewhat disdained to answer. Chen Chen stamped her feet and used her shoulder to support Chang'e, who was supported by her. Chang'e did not care about their business. She only thought for a moment and said, even if there are more elixirs, Xiaohu should not take them at this time. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua and his brother were puzzled, Chen Chen next to them said, on the first day of practicing internal strength, didn't Master say that the most important thing to practice internal strength is to take one step at a time? Don't bite off more than you can chew. Senior brother has got more than 20 years of power, but he hasn't mastered it well. Just now he almost went mad. If he suddenly increases his power, won't it be more difficult to control it? Let's wait until senior brother carefully practices the internal strength that he got for free and uses it freely. After that, she rolled her eyes at Zhang Xiaohua and said, "You don't even know this? What did your master teach you?" Zhang Xiaohua secretly sighed and said, "It's so good to have a master. If it weren't for Chang'e and Chunqin, I would have done something bad with good intentions." Then she cupped her hands and said, "Thank you for your explanation, Master Qin. If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have known. Thank you for your advice." Bah! Chunqin spat and her expression was very similar to Nie Qianyu's. But soon her expression changed and was completely different from Nie Qianyu's. She said shyly, "Senior brother can't take it today. Don't you want to give me one of the elixirs for the sake of my explanation?" Then she stretched out her chubby little hand. "Oh, okay." Hearing that, Zhang Xiaohua did not hesitate at all. She took out a jade bottle and poured 2 elixirs into Chen Chen's hand. "Ah?" Chen Chen was stunned and said, You're really giving it to me?" Then she smelled it and then laughed. "Zhang Xiaohua, what kind of elixir is this? It doesn't smell like medicine at all. Are you trying to fool a little boy?" "Hee, I know this elixir is expensive, but I'm just teasing you. If you don't want to give it to me, then don't give it to me. Why do you give me a fake elixir? You even gave me 2 of them. It shows that you're generous." Zhang Xiaohua touched her nose and said, "One is for you, and the other is for Sister Chang'e." "Hee, you even want to fool senior Sister Chang'e." Chen Chen still did not believe it. "Chen Chen," Zhang Xiaohu next to her scolded, "don't make trouble with Xiaohua. Last night, Xiaohua gave me this elixir." Chen Chen had always been Chang'e's little tail, and now she was naturally taken care of by Zhang Xiaohu. She did not dare to disobey Zhang Xiaohu's words and did not dare to not believe them. Hearing Zhang Xiaohu's words, she could not help but tremble in her hands, and the 2 meridian-nourishing elixirs almost fell to the ground. She stammered, "Zhang Xiaohua, you really want to give this elixir to me and to senior Sister Chang'e?" Zhang Xiaohua saw that Chen Chen was defeated, and she was secretly happy. She nodded and said, "A gentleman keeps his word. I said it's for you, so it's for you." Chang'e next to her said, "No, it's so expensive." Before she finished her words, Chen Chen pulled her arm and said reluctantly, "Senior Sister Chang'e, this is 20 years worth of power ahem." Zhang Xiaohu also coughed a few times, stared at Chang'e, and said, "Xiaohua gave it to you. Just take it. Why are you complaining?" Hearing this, Chang'e was a little angry, but her face was flushed. She did not know that everything yesterday had been seen clearly by Zhang Xiaohua in the air. She had always put on airs and thought that she was Zhang Xiaohu's senior sister. At this time, when she was scolded by Zhang Xiaohu, everything was exposed. How could she not be ashamed and angry? Alas, it was just that she did not realize it herself. When she talked about Zhang Xiaohu just now, she called him Xiaohu and Xiaohu, but did not hear her call him junior fellow apprentice Zhang. Then, Chang'e was a little shy and said, "Since it's Xiaohua's kindness, I won't stand on ceremony. In fact, I also miss it very much." Seeing that Chang'e was not any different from the old Chang'e, Zhang Xiaohua was very happy. She looked at her second brother who was smiling foolishly next to her and really despised him. Then, "Xiaohua, do you still have?" Chang'e asked very hesitantly. She could not even finish her sentence. Zhang Xiaohua immediately understood and said with a smile, "Sister Chang'e, do you think I have many of these pills? Moreover, even if I do, can I let others know about it except for you?" Chang'e nodded and did not ask any more questions. "That's right, senior sister. My martial arts in the sect aren't high to begin with. Only after I take this pill can I show them my prowess. If they all take it and their martial arts are higher than mine, what fun would there be?" Zhang Xiaohu also nodded and took a step forward. "You must be careful about this. Don't let others know about it, especially the people of the fragrance cult. I heard that the Misty School was destroyed because of this. We must not repeat the same mistake." "I know, senior brother," Chen Chen said softly. "I'm not that stupid." Chang'e naturally nodded. Then Zhang Xiaohu asked, "Xiaohua, when is it suitable for Chang'e and Chen Chen to take this pill? Will Chang'e's injury affect it?" Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and asked, "Sister Chang'e, The bones in your arm are broken and now I'm fixing it. Don't you know that it will affect your internal strength? Chang'e smiled and said, when I woke up just now, I already tried it. It didn't affect me much. Well, that's good. Zhang Xiaohua said. It's best to take it after the bones are healed, but it's okay to take it now. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu immediately urged. Then what are you waiting for? It takes 100 days to break bones and tendons. When Chang'e's arm is healed, won't it take a few months? Not to mention that Xiaohua may not be cheap. The environment of the Misty Hall is not suitable for taking this kind of pill. Everything should be done in the Yulan Canyon. Zhang Xiaohu was even more anxious than Chang'e. Please vote monthly, please vote, please collect, please tip, thank you. Chapter 678. So the Blood Wolf King took the lead, with the tall and thin Zhang Xiaohua riding on its back. Behind them were 2 huge mammoths and an elephant, each carrying 3 people, followed by a group of fierce beasts, which were surrounded by hundreds of blood wolves. Together, they walked towards the distant hill. When they were halfway there, Zhang Xiaohua suddenly thought of something. She patted her forehead and said loudly, "Second brother, you go first. I'll be back soon." After that, she jumped off the Blood Wolf King, turned around and disappeared. Zhang Xiaohu and Chen Chen heard the sound and turned around. But there was no sign of Zhang Xiaohua on the back of the Blood Wolf King. This kid, she's so old, but she's still so careless. Zhang Xiaohu shook his head slightly and ignored her. He was only worried about the warm beauty in his arms. She could even enter and leave the Blood Wolf King, so why should he worry about her? Chen Chen's eyes were full of stars. She didn't have time to ask Zhang Xiaohua how she flew into the sky, but now she disappeared in a flash. What kind of elixir had this little country boy been fed? The blood wolves, mammoths and other fierce beasts ran very fast. When the sun went down, they had already reached the hill. Zhang Xiaohu occasionally looked back and couldn't help but cry out, "Xiaohuayu, when did you come back?" Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and said, "When you saw Sister Chang'e's injury on the way, I came back." Zhang Xiaohu blushed and said, "Why didn't you say hello when you came back?" This Zhang Xiaohua jumped off the back of the Blood Wolf King and said, "I saw that you were concentrating, so I didn't dare to disturb you." Zhang Xiaohu was speechless. He carried Chang'e and carefully jumped down from the tall mammoth. Chen Chen looked at the caves halfway up the mountain, and her face was extremely gloomy. Needless to say, last night, there were dozens of disciples in the hall and it was lively here. Now there were only 3 people left. How could she not be sad? Seeing this, Zhang Xiaohua didn't know how to comfort him. Didn't she also feel terrible for a long time when she saw the disciples of the Pill Expansion Hall being killed? This was human nature. If this was not the case, this person would be heartless. The hill was not high. Although Zhang Xiaohu was injured, he could still climb it. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua looked at the surrounding beasts and patted the Blood Wolf King's head. She waved her hand outside and said, "Brother Wolf, let them all go. I have seen your intentions. When your 2 little princes, or little princesses wake up, I will tell them. They can't see anything now, so I have the final say in your performance. So you don't have to wait here. It's getting late, and we need to rest." The Blood Wolf King was not very human. It growled a few times. Except for a few beasts that seemed to be more qualified than the Blood Wolf King, they ignored it. The other beasts looked at Zhang Xiaohua, who was standing beside the Blood Wolf King, and reluctantly turned around and left. Then the Blood Wolf King turned its head and opened its mouth. Its blood-red tongue stuck out for a long time, and it seemed to be reporting to Zhang Xiaohua. It seemed that there was still some grievance in its eyes. Zhang Xiaohua curled her lips and said, "Are you going to snitch now?" Then he patted its head to show that he understood. Then he pointed at the hundreds of wolves around them and waved his hand. The Blood Wolf King was very aggrieved, and it groaned in a low voice to protest. Zhang Xiaohua was puzzled. Where is the demeanor of the Blood Wolf King? Why do you look more and more like a mangy dog from the Guozhuang house? However, since Zhang Xiaohua had already told the Blood Wolf King what she wanted, it was not up to Zhang Xiaohua to decide whether it would go or not. In fact, if there was a blood wolf to protect her, she would be able to sleep peacefully at night. Therefore, Zhang Xiaohua ignored the Blood Wolf King and walked to Zhang Xiaohu's side and said, "Second brother, let's go up. Oh, this mountain is quite high. You are injured. Do you want me to carry Sister Chang'e?" Zhang Xiaohu curled his lips and said, "It's just a small mountain. How can it be a high mountain in your mouth? Chang'e is not heavy. I can carry her. If I move here and there, I'm afraid I'll hurt my wound." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said to Chen, "Senior sister, you lead the way." Chen suppressed her sadness and said in a low voice, "Okay." Then, she stretched her body and used her qigong to go up the mountain. Zhang Xiaohua jumped to Zhang Xiaohu's side and supported him with one hand. She did not use the wind-controlling technique, only the Misty School's qigong, and slowly followed behind Chen. In the beginning, Zhang Xiaohu still wanted to use his internal force, but just as he started to use his internal force, there was a piercing pain in his meridians, so he did not dare to use his internal force again. Moreover, seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was effortlessly pulling him along, and was not much slower than Chen, he simply did not exert any strength at all. He did not even take a step forward, and only focused on protecting the stability of his arms. Zhang Xiaohua saw this and smiled. She only used a little strength with her left hand to lift the two of them, and walked up the mountain easily. Not long after, the four of them came to the mountainside, where there were 3 caves. The entrances of the caves had been repaired. Obviously, they were the caves where the disciples of the Misty Hall lived yesterday. Zhang Xiaohu looked at the caves and said, "Among the 3 caves, the one on the far left is the largest. Yesterday, our ordinary disciples all lived there. The one in the middle is a little smaller, and only the female disciples lived there. The one on the far right can only accommodate 2 people, which is where senior brother Chen, the leader, lived." "Alas," Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said, "I also wanted to say that it might be dangerous at night, and we should live together. Since second brother said so, I guess you must be careful and not bully others. Then we have to let Sister Chang'e and Chen live in the small cave." Not only did Zhang Xiaohua finish her words, but Zhang Xiaohu also spat and said angrily, "I am not Li Jinfeng. Is it necessary? I just told you about the layout of the 3 caves, and also remembered the brothers who died yesterday. When did I go too far? Chang'e was hurt like this, how could I bear to? How could I let Chen take care of her alone?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled. His smile was filled with joy. She seemed to have never been so happy in the past few years. Zhang Xiaohu also pursed his lips and couldn't restrain his smile. The dark clouds that had been in his heart for many years were swept away the moment he saw Zhang Xiaohua today. Chen also said quickly, "I'd better live with senior brother and senior sister. In the past, when there were many people and there was no place to live, didn't we still live together? Don't listen to this guy's nonsense. There are only a few of us. Senior brother will protect you well." Zhang Xiaohu rolled his eyes at Zhang Xiaohua and said to Chen gently, "Okay." Chen was like a cheerful bird and said, "I'll go to the middle cave to tidy up and make a warm bedding for each of you." Zhang Xiaohu said quickly, "Don't bother. Make a bedding for your senior sister Chang'e first, and let her lie down first." Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, "The bedding is not as warm as second brother's arms." Zhang Xiaohu's face turned red and he said, "I'm tired too." While they were talking, Chen shouted from inside, "Senior brother, come in. I've made the bedding." Zhang Xiaohua was stunned and blurted out, "So fast? They were all used last night. Just tidy them up." Zhang Xiaohu said angrily. He greatly despised Zhang Xiaohua's lack of common sense. When they entered the cave, it was already dusk. There was already a torch lit in the cave. Perhaps it was used last night. Zhang Xiaohu carefully put Chang'e on the hay near the inside and turned back to say, "Xiaohua, come and take a look. Is there anything wrong with her after the bumpy journey?" Seeing that her second brother cared so much about Chang'e, Zhang Xiaohua obeyed and stepped forward. She placed her fingers on Chang'e's wrist and carefully examined her pulse. Then, she used her true qi to check her meridians. In the end, she was still worried and released her remaining divine sense to check everything. Only then did she say, "Don't worry, everything is normal. With me, the great genius doctor of Rejuvenation Valley. Nothing will happen to elder sister Chang'e. Zhang Xiaohua didn't expect that the Qi Huang technique she learned in Rejuvenation Valley would be used on second brother and Chang'e in Yulon Canyon. Rejuvenation Valley? Great doctor? Chen Chen was curious at first, then he laughed and asked, "When did you go to Rejuvenation Valley?" "That year, Villa Master wanted to go there, but he returned halfway." "Haha, not only did you go there, but you also became a great doctor? By the way, I saw you checking her pulse just now. Do you really have medical skills?" Zhang Xiaohua patted his chest casually and said with a smile, "Of course, great Dr. Zhang, it's true." Zhang Xiaohu didn't say anything at this time. Zhang Xiaohua had already skillfully helped them bandage and set their bones. Although she couldn't be called a great doctor, she couldn't take off the hat of knowing medical skills. "Well then quickly tell me how you learn medical skills?" Chen Chen was extremely curious and opened her eyes wide. "I'm going to faint." Zhang Xiaohua rubbed his eyes. If it weren't for the torches in the cave, he almost thought that the small and delicate Chen Chen in front of him was the inner disciple Chen Chen of Lingxiang Peak. "Why is every woman so curious?" Zhang Xiaohua secretly said. However, he walked out of the cave and said, "There are many stories in 4 or 5 years. Let's talk slowly." After walking out of the cave, the voice came again. "I'll go get some dry wood first and make a bonfire." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he was about to say something to stop him, but then he thought that since the Blood Wolf King had become Zhang Xiaohua's mount, he wouldn't be afraid of raising a bonfire and attracting fierce beasts. Sure enough, not long after, Zhang Xiaohua came up with a big bundle of dry wood. Just behind him, there was a blood wolf meekly carrying an even bigger bundle of dry wood. Zhang Xiaohua put it in the cave, and the blood wolf obediently went away. Zhang Xiaohua rubbed his hands and said, "Good luck. I really can't help it." The Blood Wolf King left, but left a lot of blood wolves around. "I saw them just now and casually took them." It seemed that only Zhang Xiaohua could make a blood wolf carry firewood. In this Yulon Grand Canyon, it was probably the first time in thousands of years. Zhang Xiaohu and Chen Chen were dumbfounded. Zhang Xiaohua easily made a bonfire. For a while, the cave became much warmer. Chapter 679. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua skillfully raising the bonfire, Zhang Xiaohu's heart felt sour for no reason. His younger brother had grown up with him. Even before they parted at Shizue Mountain, he had never seen him tend to any bonfire. Now that he saw him skillfully, he didn't know how much hardship he had suffered. Zhang Xiaohu had forgotten that his younger brother was already an 18-year-old adult. He should still know the necessary common sense. People said that in the eyes of parents, children would never grow up. Wasn't it the same in the eyes of an older brother? Zhang Xiaohu softly asked. "Xiaohua, where have you been these past few years? How did you suddenly appear in the fragrance cult? Why did you appear in the Yulon Grand Canyon? You haven't gone home to see your parents, right?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Second brother, there have been too many things in the past few years. I can't explain it all in a short time. Since I can see you, we brothers have plenty of time. There's no need to rush. Oh, I have already returned to the Guozhuang house. Father and mother are very good. Sister-in-law also gave birth to a big fat boy." "Is that so?" Zhang Xiaohu was pleasantly surprised. He hadn't heard any news from his hometown for a long time. At this time when he heard the news, his eyes suddenly became moist. Good. Mother and father are all well. With big brother and sister-in-law at home, I can rest assured. Now that I have a grandson to hold, mother also has something to do. Look at you. It seems that you don't want to go home." Zhang Xiaohua glanced at his second brother and said, "When I came out, mother was very worried about you. She heard that the Misty School was destroyed. She didn't know whether you were alive or not. I came to the fragrance cult to look for you. I didn't expect to meet you here before I even reached Shirxin Peak. This god is really interesting." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, his heart thumped and he said, "Then what should we do? The fragrance cult has always been a place where people can enter but can't leave. How can they pass our news to father and mother?" Zhang Xiaohua stretched lazily and said, "Since you're living well, I'm relieved. Although my parents are worried, it's still good news. After a few years, When someone from the incense cult leaves, we'll think of something. Right now, it's definitely impossible. Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment. What his younger brother said was right. Although the two brothers were outside, they were still alive and well. This was what his parents were most concerned about. It was only a matter of time before the news reached home. It was better than bad news. Zhang Xiaohua smiled when she saw that her second brother was a little sad. Don't think too much. Just take care of yourself. That's the best way to comfort your parents. Immediately, he looked at Chang'e, who was lying on the bed, and said in a low voice, he also brought back a charming wife. Father and mother will probably laugh their teeth off. As he said this, he put his shoulder on Zhang Xiaohua's shoulder and made a you-know expression. Zhang Xiaohu's face turned red. Looking at Chang'e's red cheeks, his eyes softened and his complexion became much better. Looking at the sky outside, Zhang Xiaohua said, Second brother, it is not early. I think it is better to heal your meridians as soon as possible. This internal injury can be cured sooner. Zhang Xiaohu was puzzled and said, It is still early. Healing in the dead of night is the right way. Zhang Xiaohua touched his nose and said, You have time, but I don't. When the time comes, I won't be able to protect you. Zhang Xiaohu was startled and immediately understood. He said with a smile, You still can't wake up at night. Shrugging, Zhang Xiaohua said, Who knows? Having a good sleep, full of energy, and a good appetite is not a bad thing. Then she looked at Chen Chen, who was lying beside Chang'e and snoring because of a day of fear. She got up and walked out of the cave. She cast a few jade talismans and sealed the entrance of the cave firmly. Then she turned around and said, I happen to have a medicinal pill for healing meridians. I'll let you have a taste. After saying this, under Zhang Xiaohu's incredulous gaze, she took out a jade bottle from her arms. It was the Meridian Nourishing Pill that Zhang Xiaohua refined in Rejuvenation Valley. It was written in the formula that the main effect of the Meridian Nourishing Pill was to nourish the meridians in the body and repair damaged meridians. Although this effect was targeted at practitioners of the Way of Immortality, the meridians used by the internal strength of martial arts were the same as those of the Way of Immortality. Presumably, it would be effective. It wasn't that Zhang Xiaohua hadn't thought of using the refined Crimson Flame Pill, but the Crimson Flame Pill was obviously a byproduct of the Meridian Nourishing Pill. Moreover, according to Rejuvenation Valley, it only increased one's power, and didn't know if it had the effect of repairing meridians. Zhang Xiaohua didn't want his second brother to try this. Moreover, the Crimson Flame Pill was a medicinal pill of the Way of Immortality, and the Meridian Nourishing Pill was its byproduct. Even if Zhang Xiaohua was given 10,000 reasons, he would choose the best medicinal pill for his second brother first. Zhang Xiaohu watched as Zhang Xiaohua poured out a medicinal pill from the bottle. He took it with his hand and very naturally put it in front of his nose to smell it. He said curiously, Why doesn't this medicinal pill have any medicinal smell? Don't tell me it's already lost its effect. Zhang Xiaohua shook his head with a smile. Helpless, Zhang Xiaohu said again, It seems that apart from the Yuhuandan pill you gave me, the bone solidifying pill just now, and this medicinal pill are all strange. Other good medicinal pills overflow with medicinal fragrance and have good appearance. This medicinal pill of yours, however, has nothing at all. Right, what's the name of this? Meridian Nourishing Pill, Zhang Xiaohua said unhappily. It's specially made to repair meridians. If you don't like it, then just don't eat it. Haven't you heard of the saying of the ancients? A good medicinal pill doesn't show off its appearance? Zhang Xiaohu shook his head with a deadpan expression. I really haven't heard of it. As he spoke, Zhang Xiaohu walked to a corner slightly further away from Chang'e and the others. He sat down cross-legged and asked, How do I take this medicinal pill? Of course it's taken orally, Zhang Xiaohua said with a beaming smile. Immediately, she also walked to Zhang Xiaohu's side and said, Second brother, before you take the pill, you have to tell me the route of your meridian's cultivation. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohu shook his head like a rattledrum. No, this is our Misty School's divine skill. I can't at this point. He couldn't continue and covered up. Without master's permission, I can't tell anyone. Even if you're my biological brother, I can't violate the rules of the faction. Okay. Hearing Zhang Xiaohu's words, Zhang Xiahua was also happy. This meant that the disciples of the Misty School still regarded her as a disciple of the Misty School, and not as a disciple of the Misty Hall. This was what Zhang Xiahua wanted to see. Thus, Zhang Xiahua sat cross-legged behind Zhang Xiaohu and said, "Take the medicinal pill. Then follow the route of your internal strength cultivation, and circulate the medicinal power in your meridians 3 times. You don't have to worry about anything else." So simple? Zhang Xiaohu couldn't believe it. Can my meridians be repaired just like that? Zhang Xiahua nodded. It's that simple. Haven't you heard that simple is true? Okay. Zhang Xiaohu listened to Zhang Xiaohua's words. Putting the soothing meridians pill into his mouth, he only felt that the medicinal pill melted in his mouth. His mouth was full of medicinal fragrance. Zhang Xiaohu thought, it seems that Xiahua didn't trick me. Alas, if Zhang Xiahua knew that second brother was thinking like this, wouldn't she vomit blood? When the medicinal pill entered his mouth, it turned into a warm current. Zhang Xiaohu carefully guided this warm current into his meridians. Then, according to the route recorded in the ethereal divine art, it slowly flowed in his meridians. Zhang Xiahua sat beside her second brother, and had already transferred a strand of qi to him. Wrapped in the medicinal power of the soothing meridians pill, it slowly flowed along the route that Zhang Xiaohu had pointed out. This soothing meridians pill was an immortal medicinal pill. Its effect on the martial arts meridians was still unknown. Although Zhang Xiahua wanted to leave the best things for her family, she also had to ensure their safety. Zhang Xiahua slowly controlled her qi to release the medicinal power of the soothing meridians pill. The medicinal power of the soothing meridians pill, combined with the faint star power in it, slowly, carefully, and quickly repaired Zhang Xiaohu's broken meridians. Previously, when Zhang Xiaohu lived in the Guozhuang house, he had lived in the same room as Zhang Xiahua. When Zhang Xiahua practiced at night, she also practiced the ethereal divine art. At that time, Zhang Xiahua was already able to attract starlight, so when Zhang Xiaohu guided his internal energy, some starlight also entered his meridians. The effect of the starlight was still unknown, but as early as the first time Zhang Xiahua attracted lightning, she was already able to completely repair the meridians that had been torn by the violent lightning. Therefore, although Zhang Xiaohu only absorbed a small amount of star power, it was still very important to him. When Zhang Xiaohu started practicing the art of ethereal divination, he was already 18 years old. He had long since passed the best time to practice internal energy. Logically speaking, it was impossible for him to have greater achievements in the area of internal energy. However, it just so happened that this older disciple, who everyone looked down on as a direct disciple, achieved achievements that ordinary people could not achieve in 10 years in just 4 years. It was just that the Misty School was in a state of decline and no one paid attention to him, so Zhang Xiaohu did not have any opportunity to show off. It had to be said that all of this was related to the changes in his meridians caused by the star power that Zhang Xiaohu had introduced into his body. At this time, the soothing meridians pill itself was a miraculous medicine that could repair meridians. In addition, when Zhang Xiahua was refining the pill, she had also introduced starlight into the pill. Wasn't the effect of this soothing meridians pill more than doubled? Furthermore, there were other effects that no one knew about. Zhang Xiaohua's true energy wrapped around the medicinal power of the soothing meridians pill, and repaired Zhang Xiaohua's torn meridians bit by bit. After circulating one cycle, all the meridians were repaired. However, Zhang Xiahua had previously told Zhang Xiaohu to circulate 3 cycles, so Zhang Xiaohu did not hesitate to start a new cycle from the lower dantian. Seeing that her second brother was continuing, Zhang Xiahua did not dare to delay. Just like before, she slowly released the medicinal power of the soothing meridians pill. This time, her meridians were completely repaired. The medicinal power of the soothing meridians pill and the star power began to transform and expand them. After one cycle, the flexibility and elasticity of her meridians changed dramatically. Even the width of her meridians had increased by 30%. Following that was the third cycle. This time, the effect of the soothing meridians pill was not as strong as the second time, but there was still some improvement, and the width of her meridians had also increased. Chapter 680. After 3 circulations, Zhang Xiaohu's meridians were completely different from before. Just based on the refinement of his meridians, it could be said that he was on par with the 6 ethereal tigers of the past. However, when the meridian soothing pill's medicinal power returned to his lower dantian, there was still a lot of medicinal power left. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua's mind seemed to have been struck by lightning. He instantly thought of the time when he was in Lu Town, when he rescued that little girl on the 7th of July, and pointed out that evil thief's dantian. Since he could use his internal energy to poke a hole in the dantian, preventing his internal energy from being stored in the dantian, then could he also repair the hole in the dantian and restore the internal energy in his body? Moreover, since the meridian soothing pill's medicinal power could repair his meridians, it should also be able to repair his dantian. Thus Zhang Xiaohua didn't greet Zhang Xiaohu. He wrapped the meridian soothing pill's medicinal power with his vital energy, and slowly released the medicinal power around his dantian in an attempt to repair his lower dantian. Sure enough, the meridian soothing pill's lower dantian had the same effect as the meridians. Not only did it completely repair some parts of Zhang Xiaohua's lower dantian, it also transformed his lower dantian into a tougher and wider one. This kind of effect was something that could not be achieved by any other martial Dao cultivation method. Seeing that his lower dantian had been completely refined, and that the meridian soothing pill's medicinal power was still half gone, Zhang Xiaohua had no choice but to withdraw her vital energy and whisper, "Second brother, the meridian soothing pill's medicinal power doesn't seem to be completely used up. You should circulate your energy and refine it. Perhaps there will be an unexpected gain." An unexpected gain? Zhang Xiaohu was also puzzled. However, he still followed Zhang Xiaohua's instructions and silently circulated the ethereal divine art to slowly refine the medicinal power left in his dantian. This tempering process was not a big deal, but rather, an extremely exquisite medicinal power rose from his dantian and flowed along his meridians. Every inch it flowed, a portion of inner energy would be generated. Every time it circulated, a portion of inner energy would be generated. Every time it circulated, a portion of inner energy would be generated. Zhang Xiaohu was overjoyed, but he didn't have time to tell Zhang Xiaohua about it. He just focused on absorbing this rare opportunity. When Zhang Xiaohua saw that her second brother was concentrating on his training, she didn't bother with him anymore. He was very clear that since the Crimson Flame pill could increase one's cultivation by 5 years, the remaining meridian soothing pill should also be able to increase one's internal energy. As for how much it could increase one's internal energy, he didn't care because the meridian soothing pill wasn't the most important pill. He also had the illustrious qi-generating pill prepared to give to Zhang Xiaohu. After settling Zhang Xiaohu down, Zhang Xiaohua raised her eyes to look at the bonfire that was no longer very bright. She added some more dry wood to the side, and the flames immediately rose a lot higher. The entire cave suddenly became bright again. Because Chang'e had taken the pill, her body was absorbing the medicinal power. Not only did she not look cold, but the tip of her nose also exuded fine beads of sweat. On the other hand, Chun Chun, who was lying on her side, didn't bring any bedding because she had run away in a hurry. At this moment, she was curled up with the black puppy in her arms and was sleeping soundly. It seemed that she was still a little cold. Pinching her chin and thinking for a moment, Zhang Xiaohua took out the new clothes that Nie Qianyu had sewn for her from her purse and covered Chen Chen's body. She then got some dry grass from the side to cover herself. Only then did she walk to a corner alone and take out the primordial stones to restore the true energy in her body. After a long while, Zhang Xiaohua opened her eyes and raised her hand to look at the faint crack on her left hand. She revealed a bitter smile. At present, this silver pupil seemed to only be able to emit a silver beam of light and open the cave where the black lightning and yellow wind were buried. Its other functions were completely unknown. However, this thing was really not something that Zhang Xiaohua could control at the moment. Well, not to mention using it, it was impossible to make it behave. It had absorbed 90% of Zhang Xiaohua's divine sense and 50% of her true energy. It directly reduced Zhang Xiaohua's cultivation to the 4th or 5th level of the qi refining stage. However, except for the faint tiredness in the pupil, Zhang Xiaohua knew nothing about this thing. She could only regard it as a treasure in her heart. That was all. Moreover, if she connected the essence of herbalism with this thing, Zhang Xiaohua's entire body and mind would be exhausted, so much so that Zhang Xiaohua did not even have the mood to pay attention to it. The effort and the gain were really not proportionate. I made a deal that made me lose money, but alas, I was careless, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but complain to herself. However, this silver pupil had already trapped Zhang Xiaohua's left hand. It was too late to regret. Zhang Xiaohua watched as Huang Feng easily extracted the silver eye from between his eyebrows. When it was time for him to control it, he didn't know how to do it. He could only let the mysterious eye live in his left hand temporarily. Looking at the time, it was already late. Zhang Xiaohua sat down cross-legged, picked up 2 vitality stones, and did her routine homework. Not long after, starlight fell from the sky, enveloping Zhang Xiaohua. At this moment, Zhang Xiaohua was not far away. Most of his body was within the starlight. Tonight's practice was not much different from Zhang Xiaohua's previous practice. However, when the starlight shone, the silver pupil in Zhang Xiaohua's left hand gradually opened on its own. There was no expression in the pupil, only a faint suction force. Regardless of whether it was the starlight from the sky or the qi of heaven and earth in the vitality stones, it was all sucked into the pupil. The next day, the first ray of sunlight shone into the cave. Zhang Xiaohua opened her eyes and the surrounding starlight immediately disappeared. The pupil in her left hand also quietly closed, leaving only a crack. Zhang Xiaohua checked the vital energy in her body and shook her head slightly. It was only a little more than last night. The fruits of her hard work this night had been reaped by the detestable pupil in her left hand. She raised her eyes to look at Zhang Xiaohua. He was still sitting cross-legged in the same manner as before. However, at this moment, there was a faint white gas emitting from his head. It was the crucial moment of refining the medicinal power. Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to disturb second brother. Her body floated up slightly and she directly left the cave. At this time, the sun had just risen and the sky was bright. It should be the time for birds to chirp. However, at this time, Zhang Xiaohua stood at the entrance of the cave and did not hear much movement. Only the faint noise of birds could be heard from far away. When Zhang Xiaohua looked down, she could not help but find it funny. In front of the small mountain, there were hundreds of blood wolves. They were separated by a distance of several feet. They were orderly and scattered, as if they were patrolling. They surrounded the area tightly. Presumably, the surrounding birds were scared away by them. The status of yellow wind and black lightning in this Yulon Grand Canyon is really indescribable. Zhang Xiaohua secretly sighed. She immediately removed the restriction at the entrance of the cave and practiced the Big Dipper magical fist in the open space at the entrance of the cave. While she was practicing, she heard a shout from behind her. Why is it still the same fist technique? You didn't learn any other fist techniques? Zhang Xiaohua knew that her second brother had come out. However, there were still a few times left to practice. She raised her voice and said, "Second brother, wait a moment. I will finish practicing this fist technique." "Oh, okay. It just so happens that I haven't practiced the 6 he fists for a long time. I will take this opportunity to exercise my hands and feet." As he said this, Zhang Xiaohu started practicing at the side. However, when Zhang Xiaohu finished practicing, Zhang Xiaohua still had not finished practicing. This made Zhang Xiaohu feel very strange. When he was at the Lotus Flower Escort Agency, Zhang Xiaohu did not cultivate inner strength and could only practice fist techniques. Naturally, he practiced the 6 he fists over and over again. When he cultivated inner strength, especially the Misty School's core inner strength, he already understood that no matter how exquisite a fist technique was, as long as it met with exquisite inner strength, it would be unrivaled. Therefore, he had already put all his energy into cultivating inner strength. It had also been a long time since he practiced the 6 he fists. Now that he saw that Zhang Xiaohua not only learned this fist technique, but also practiced it over and over again, he was puzzled. When Zhang Xiaohua finished practicing the last round, he could not help but ask the question in his heart. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Everyone has their own fate. How about this, second brother? Let's spar. You can use all your inner strength. We will know after we spar." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he did not reply. He took a big stride forward and leaped in front of Zhang Xiaohua. He raised his hand and struck out with a palm. It was one of the moves of the 6 he fists. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and raised her arm to catch it. This move seemed right but was actually wrong. However, it blocked Zhang Xiaohu's angle of attack. Because he was sparring with his younger brother, Zhang Xiaohu did not use his inner strength in the beginning. After more than 10 moves like this, he did not gain any advantage at all. Only then did he gradually use his inner strength. However, as Zhang Xiaohu's inner strength increased, Zhang Xiaohua's strength also gradually increased. Zhang Xiaohu still did not gain any advantage. When he thought of his younger brother's divine ability, Zhang Xiaohu did not hold back anymore. He used all his inner strength and did not hold back with his fists and legs. He attacked Zhang Xiaohua with all his strength. Zhang Xiaohua released her divine sense, which covered an area of 3 feet. She did not use her true qi. She began to rely only on her strength to fight with Zhang Xiaohu. After dozens of moves, Zhang Xiaohu's moves gradually became smooth, and his control of his inner strength was also skillful. Above his head, a faint white mist gradually condensed into a line, which went straight up faintly. At this time, the sound of the 2 brothers fighting had already awakened the 2 people in the cave. Chang'e slowly walked out with the help of Chun Chen. Chang'e should have heard Chun Chen's explanation. Therefore, she only glanced at Zhang Xiaohua's face, which did not change much. Then she saw the white line on Zhang Xiaohu's head. Immediately, her face was full of horror. Her small cherry mouth was wide open at this time, but her eyes were full of joy. Chun Chen, on the other hand, looked at the 2 people who seemed to be fighting with their lives. He was somewhat puzzled. He held the black puppy in one hand and supported Chang'e in the other. He stood there very strangely. At this time he heard Zhang Xiaohu shout, "Xiaohua, I'm going to use my full strength. If you can't block it, then move aside." As he spoke, he put his palms together and directly hit Zhang Xiaohua's chest with an earth-shattering force. How could Zhang Xiaohua dodge? She raised one arm and her palm horizontally, blocking Zhang Xiaohu's palms. At this time, she no longer used pure strength. She used some of her true qi and used the soaring dragon mantra on her arm. Chapter 681. The soaring dragon cultivation method was indeed exquisite. Only 30% of his jinqi was able to suppress Zhang Xiaohu's internal energy. When Zhang Xiaohu saw that Zhang Xiaohua was not afraid at all, and was able to easily block his internal energy, his heart was filled with joy. Last night, Zhang Xiaohu used his internal energy to refine the effects of the meridian nourishing pill. Although he used an entire night of hard work, his foundation was still poor. He had only cultivated for 4 years, so by the time the sun rose, there was still a small portion of the medicinal effects that had not been refined. Furthermore, just the crimson flame pill alone was able to increase one's internal energy by 5 years. If it was refined using the immortal Tao method, it would be able to increase one's internal energy by 15 years. Zhang Xiaohua's internal energy had suddenly increased by 10 years for no reason. How could she freely control it? He took the opportunity to exchange pointers with Zhang Xiaohua. On one hand, he wanted to exercise his hands and feet. On the other hand, he wanted to use this opportunity to familiarize himself with the 10 years of internal energy that he had just obtained. Zhang Xiaohu originally wanted to slowly refine the remaining medicinal effects in his dantian in the future. However, now that he saw that Zhang Xiaohua was able to easily block his internal energy, a thought arose in his mind. Wasn't this a great opportunity to refine the remaining medicinal effects? Therefore, he immediately silently used the divine ethereal art and urged the medicinal effects in his dantian to rush into his meridians. Zhang Xiaohua saw that her second brother's internal energy had reached its peak and suddenly had new internal energy. She originally wanted to dissuade him, but she immediately understood. She smiled and said, "Second brother, so you still have some medicinal effects that you haven't refined. Then I'll give you a hand." After she finished speaking, she increased the amount of zhenqi in her hand. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua was still able to speak in such a battle of internal energy, Zhang Xiaohu's heart felt more at ease. He urged the medicinal effects and directly rushed to his arm. Changge and Chen Chen's expressions changed slightly when they saw the two of them directly fighting with their internal energy. Especially Changge. When she saw Zhang Xiaohu's internal energy surge, she was afraid that he would accidentally injure Zhang Xiaohua. Now that she saw Zhang Xiaohua speak so easily, she let out a sigh of relief. She immediately thought about how she had descended from the sky yesterday and subdued the entire blood wolf pack. How could she be injured by Zhang Xiaohu's hands? After the time it took to drink a cup of tea, Zhang Xiaohua felt that the internal energy coming from her second brother's hand. She immediately said, "Second brother, the medicinal effects should be completely refined. You should slowly withdraw your energy." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he did not dare to delay and slowly withdrew his internal energy. Fortunately, this was a battle between brothers. Zhang Xiaohu also knew that his younger brother would definitely not take the opportunity to attack. Otherwise, when he withdrew his internal energy, his opponent would take the opportunity to attack him. Even if he did not die, he would be seriously injured. When Zhang Xiaohu withdrew a portion of his internal energy, Zhang Xiaohua also withdrew a portion. After a while, both of their hands had no internal energy left. Zhang Xiaohu did not care about anything else. He immediately sat cross-legged with his palms facing the sky and quietly adjusted his internal energy. When Zhang Xiaohua saw this, she nodded slightly to Changge and Chen Chen who were standing beside her. She stood beside Zhang Xiaohu and released her divine sense to protect him. Although Zhang Xiaohua did not practice internal energy, she knew the dangers involved. Back then, words such as qi deviation were always on the tip of her tongue. Now that she saw her second brother immediately adjusting his internal energy without asking anything, she knew the reason. Chang Ji's body had not yet recovered, so the responsibility of protecting him must be taken up by him. At this time, within Zhang Xiaohu's meridians, due to the impact of Zhang Xiaohua's powerful internal energy and his own deliberate indulgence, the last part of the medicinal effect of the meridian nourishing pill had been forcibly refined. The surging internal energy madly produced in Zhang Xiaohu's lower dantian, and then rushed into the meridians in his body. Zhang Xiaohu was now like a weak child, trying to use his slender arms to control a small boat. He felt very powerless. Fortunately, his meridians had been transformed by the meridian nourishing pill last night. They were tougher and wider than most people's meridians. Under the impact of the huge internal energy, there was not the slightest damage. Under the galloping internal energy, there were even signs of the meridians faintly expanding. Zhang Xiaohu did not dare to be careless. He calmly guarded his heart and tried to control the somewhat crazy internal energy. It went along the meridians in his body, one cycle after another. Changge, who stood to the side and did not speak, was more nervous than Zhang Xiaohu at this time. The internal energy in Zhang Xiaohu's meridians was frantic. From the outside, his face was constantly changing between green and red. The white qi that had been condensed into a line above his head was sometimes scattered and sometimes gathered. It was a sign of qi deviation. However, even though Chang Ji's fingernails were clenched into the flesh, she could not help Zhang Xiaohu in the slightest. At this moment, Changge almost wanted to suffer for Zhang Xiaohu. Changge felt that Zhang Xiaohu was in danger. Zhang Xiaohua, who had already released her divine sense, was one step ahead of him. She saw Zhang Xiaohua stretch out her finger, which was only a few inches away from Zhang Xiaohu's back. As long as she saw the slightest trace of inheritance, she would immediately point it out. However, Zhang Xiaohua herself was also clear that the internal energy cultivation should be the same as the true qi. Only when she could control it, it could be her own cultivation. If she had the help of others, her future achievements would inevitably be limited. Therefore, unless it was a last resort, the true qi on Zhang Xiaohua's finger could not be transferred. In another half a cup of tea's time, she did not know how many cycles the internal energy had run in Zhang Xiaohu's body. She only saw that Zhang Xiaohu's face was becoming more and more normal, and the white line condensed by the internal energy above his head was gradually condensed. It became more and more shaped, pointing straight to the sky. At this time, Zhang Xiaohua's finger quietly withdrew. In fact, she did not point this finger at the beginning. Zhang Xiaohua already knew in her heart that the most difficult moment had passed. In the future, Zhang Xiaohu could only be more skillful, and there was no need for her to intervene. Sure enough, in another half a cup of tea's time, the white line above Zhang Xiaohu's head gradually disappeared. Following that, Zhang Xiaohu opened his eyes, and his eyes were filled with surprise. When he woke up in the morning, he only roughly checked his internal energy. He only knew that it had increased by a lot, but as for how much, he did not have a direct idea. He immediately compared it with Zhang Xiaohua. At this time, he had refined the remaining medicinal power of the soothing pulse pill, and combined it with the internal energy that had increased last night. At this time, he felt that the internal energy in his meridians was like a turbulent river, continuous and unending. It was a realm that he had never dreamed of before. When he raised his head and was about to ask Zhang Xiaohua, he saw a pair of watery eyes looking at him with concern. Immediately his face revealed a gentle expression, and he said with a smile, "Are you okay?" Changa's face was slightly red, as if she was thinking of yesterday's charm and gentleness. She slightly lowered her head and said in a soft voice, "I'm okay. How about the injuries on your body? Does it still hurt?" "It didn't hurt a long time ago. The places where I was bitten by the blood wolf, and the places where my bones were broken are all warm and itchy. I think it's because of the magic of Xiaohua's pill yesterday." Immediately she said to Zhang Xiaohua, "Xiaohua, thank you. Second, Sister Chang'e, we're all family. Please don't mention the word thank you." This family did not know whether it was the Zhang family or the Misty School. In short, Chang'e was embarrassed to think too much. She looked at Zhang Xiaohu again and probed, "Xiaohua, just now when you were practicing martial arts with Xiaohua, it seems that your internal energy has improved a lot. And when you were practicing your internal energy, you actually condensed it into a line. This is the appearance of internal energy practicing to the perfection stage." Yu Zhang Xiaohu talked about what happened yesterday and just now. He also said in a puzzled tone, "I feel that I have a lot of internal energy in my body, but I don't know to what extent I've practiced it." Chang'e laughed out loud. Zhang Xiaohu was telling the truth. He had only practiced internal energy for a few years. In addition to the changes in the Misty School, he didn't have a better practice environment. He didn't know a lot of basic knowledge. Of course, he didn't know to what extent he had practiced his internal energy. In fact, even Zhang Xiaohua didn't know this question. If he answered, it would only be a number from Rejuvenation Valley. "Come here and let me see." Chang'e nodded. Zhang Xiaohu obediently walked in front of Chang'e and stretched out his hand. Chang'e stretched out her hand, and a stream of internal energy entered Zhang Xiaohu's meridians. As the internal energy went deeper, Chang'e's face was first filled with surprise, but it slowly turned into confusion. She frowned slightly. Seeing Chang'e like this, Zhang Xiaohu was also nervous. When Chang'e finally withdrew her hand, he immediately asked, "What's wrong? Is there something wrong?" Zhang Xiaohua, who was beside him, was also watching anxiously. He didn't want to ruin his second brother's cultivation with his good intentions. Chang'e pondered for a moment and said hesitantly, "There's nothing wrong. It just feels a little strange." Chen Chen also said, "Senior sister, is it that the appearance of senior brother condensing his qi into a line is different from his actual cultivation?" "Yes, it's like that." Chang'e nodded and said, "When the internal energy is condensed into a line, it should be more than 30 years of internal energy cultivation. How many years have you been cultivating? How can you have such an achievement? However, the internal energy in your meridians is abundant. Although it's not 30 years, it should still be more than 20 years of internal energy cultivation." "Ah." Zhang Xiaohu was dumbfounded and said with his mouth wide open, "Chang'e, are you sure you didn't see wrong? I actually have more than 20 years of cultivation?" Chang'e still nodded. I've been cultivating internal energy for more than 10 years. Although I don't know what 30 years of internal energy cultivation is like, I've heard about it from Master. Previously, you worked hard to cultivate and made rapid progress. 4 years of hard work is equivalent to 7 years of other people's internal energy cultivation. However, after I didn't see you for a night, I woke up and found that your cultivation is something I can't even catch up to. As she spoke, a smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Zhang Xiaohu knew that his cultivation had improved greatly, but he didn't expect it to be such a huge improvement. This good news made him feel a little dizzy. He could only open his mouth and smile foolishly. Zhang Xiaohua next to him asked, Sister Chang'e, my second brother's internal energy has improved by leaps and bounds. Is there anything wrong with it? Chapter 682. Of course. Chang'e pursed her lips and smiled. Actually, as Chen Chen said just now, your second brother's internal strength should be more than 30 years, but his real internal strength is only 20 years. This is what I was puzzled about. Of course, this situation also shows that as long as Xiaohu works hard, the difference of 10 years can be achieved very quickly. In other words, my second brother doesn't need to spend another 10 years of hard work to achieve the internal strength that other people need 10 years to achieve? That should be the case. Chang'e nodded. Zhang Xiaohua pondered for a moment and asked, then what if my second brother gains another 30 years of internal strength? Ah. What? How is this possible? The three of them were very surprised and cried out at the same time. Chang'e opened her eyes wide and said, Xiaohua, the thing you gave Xiaohu, is it the legendary magical pill that increases internal strength? Do you have the same kind of pill? Then, without waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to nod, she explained, maybe you don't know, this kind of pill that increases internal strength, although it's good, seems to be very harmful to the meridians. Think about it, it's a narrow road for a person to walk on. If you suddenly let 3 rows of carriages walk side by side, there will definitely be a big problem. I think that the signs of Xiaohu's qi deviation just now are because his meridians can't adapt to the huge amount of internal strength. Then doesn't that mean that no one dares to take the pill that increases internal strength? Zhang Xiaohua knew that Chang'e's guess was wrong, but she still asked curiously. This situation is because your second brother has just started cultivating inner force. If he has been cultivating for a long time, like our Misty Sect's sect leader which one of them hasn't been immersed in inner force for dozens of years? Their meridians have been tempered to be incomparably tough. This sudden increase in inner force makes it easier to control. Oh, so it's like that. Zhang Xiaohua somewhat understood. Of course, his heart was more at ease. What was the meridian nourishing pill for? It was to nourish and refine the meridians. After Zhang Xiaohu took the meridian nourishing pill, the meridians in his body were definitely comparable to masters who practiced for dozens of years. Then Chang'e said, there's another problem. Each kind of pill is only effective for the first time. If you continue to take it, the effect will be greatly reduced. I think if you give Xiaohu the same pill, it won't increase his internal strength for more than 10 years. At most it's 3 to 5 years. Zhang Xiaohua was still unwilling to give up and asked, then what if it's a different type of pill? This? Chang'e looked at Zhang Xiaohua as if he was looking at a monster. In Jianghu he had only heard of the elixir that could increase one's power, but he had never seen it. Even in the ethereal sect, he had only picked up some spirit herbs from the secret land, and refined some elixirs that could increase his power. However, this was not something that Chang'e could know. Moreover, as long as one could get this kind of elixir, he didn't know how much merit he had accumulated in his previous life. When Chang'e saw that Zhang Xiaohu's internal strength suddenly increased by dozens of years, of course, he thought that Zhang Xiaohua only had one elixir. Then Zhang Xiaohua asked again, and Chang'e naturally thought that maybe there were 2. This possibility was the limit of Chang'e's imagination. At this time, when he heard that there was another kind of elixir that could increase internal strength, Chang'e almost thought that he was dreaming, or Zhang Xiaohua was joking. Although Chen Chen's kung fu was not as good as Chang'e's, and her knowledge was not as good as Chang'e's, She had heard about this kind of magical elixir. At this time, she couldn't help but curl her lips and say, Zhang Xiaohua, you really know how to brag. Zhang Xiaohua laughed. When he was about to speak, his heart suddenly thumped. He thought of the joke Zhang Xiaohua made yesterday, sword light. Sword light was not something that could be done with more than 20 years of internal strength. Since Zhang Xiaohua said so yesterday, could it be? Zhang Xiaohua looked at his second brother, his future second sister-in-law, and then at the petite Chen Chen who had a look of disbelief on her face. Zhang Xiaohua smiled. If they could not be trusted, then who else in this world could be trusted? So Zhang Xiaohua nodded with a smile. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's affirmative action, Chang'e almost felt that all his cognition was about to change. Everything could happen to this child in his impression. Well, she somewhat forgot that yesterday before she fainted, she saw the immortal falling from the sky. Do you really have other elixirs that can increase internal strength? Even Chen Chen felt that his mouth and tongue were dry, and he still didn't believe it. Zhang Xiaohua raised his chin and somewhat disdained to answer. Chen Chen stamped his foot and used his shoulder to support Chang'e. Chang'e didn't care about their business. She just thought for a while and said, even if I have other elixirs, it's not suitable for Xiaohu to take them at this time. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua and his brother's puzzlement, Chen Chen next to them said, on the first day of practicing internal strength, didn't Master say that the most important thing to practice internal strength is to take one step at a time? Don't bite off more than you can chew. Senior brother has got more than 20 years of internal strength, but he hasn't mastered it well. Just now he almost went mad. If he suddenly increases his internal strength, won't it be more difficult to control it? Let's wait until senior brother carefully understands the internal strength that he got for free, and can use it freely. After that, she rolled her eyes at Zhang Xiaohua and said, you don't even know this? What did your master teach you? Zhang Xiaohua secretly sighed and said, it's so good to have a master. If it weren't for Chang'e and Chen Chen, I would have done something bad with good intentions. Then she cupped her hands and said, thank you for your explanation, Master Chen. If you didn't tell me, I wouldn't have known. Thank you for your advice. Bah. Chen Chen spat and her expression was very similar to Nie Qianyu's. But soon her expression changed, and was completely different from Nie Qianyu's. She said shyly, senior brother can't take it today. Don't you want to give me one of the elixirs for the sake of my explanation? Then she stretched out her chubby little hand. Oh, okay. Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua didn't hesitate at all. She took out a jade bottle and poured 2 elixirs into Chen Chen's hand. Ah? Chen Chen was stunned and said, you're really giving it to me. Then she smelled it and then laughed. Zhang Xiaohua, what kind of elixir is this? It doesn't smell like medicine at all. Are you trying to fool a little boy? Hee, I know this elixir is precious, but I'm just teasing you. If you don't want to give it to me, I won't give it to you. Why do you give me a fake elixir? You even gave me 2 of them. It shows that you're generous. Zhang Xiaohua touched her nose and said, one is for you, and the other is for Sister Chang'e. Hee, you even want to fool senior sister Chen Chen still didn't believe it. Chen Chen. Zhang Xiaohu next to her scolded, don't make trouble with Xiaohua. Last night, Xiaohua gave me this elixir. Chen Chen had always been Chang'e's little tail, and now she was naturally taken care of by Zhang Xiaohu. She didn't dare to disobey Zhang Xiaohu's words, and didn't dare to not believe them. Hearing Zhang Xiaohu's words, she couldn't help trembling in her hands, and the 2 made nourishing elixirs almost fell to the ground. She stammered, Zhang Xiaohua, you really want to give this elixir to me, and to senior sister? Zhang Xiaohua saw that Chen Chen was defeated, and she was secretly happy. She nodded and said, a gentleman keeps his word. If I say it's for you, it's for you. Chang'e next to her said, no, it's so precious. Before she finished her words, Chen Chen pulled her arm and said reluctantly, senior sister, this is 20 years worth of power ahem. Zhang Xiaohu also coughed a few times, stared at Chang'e, and said, Xiaohua gave it to you. Just take it. Don't talk nonsense. Hearing this, Chang'e was a little angry, but her face was flushed. She didn't know that everything yesterday was clearly seen by Zhang Xiaohua in the air. She had been putting on airs and thinking that she was Zhang Xiaohu's senior sister. At this time, when she was scolded by Zhang Xiaohu, everything was exposed. How could she not be angry out of shame? Alas, it was just that she didn't realize it herself. When she talked about Zhang Xiaohu just now, she called him Xiaohu, and didn't hear her call him junior brother Zhang. Then Chang'e was a little shy and said, "Since it's Xiaohua's good intention, I won't be polite. In fact, I also want it very much." Seeing that Chang'e was not different from the old Chang'e, Zhang Xiaohua was very happy. She looked at her second brother who was smiling foolishly next to her and really despised him. Then, "Xiaohua, do you still have?" Chang'e asked very hesitantly, but she couldn't even finish her sentence. Zhang Xiaohua immediately understood and said with a smile, "Sister Chang'e, do you think I have many of these pills? And even if I do, can I let others know except for you?" Chang'e nodded and didn't ask any more questions. "That's right, senior sister. My martial arts in the sect aren't high to begin with. Only after I take this pill can I show them my prowess. If they all take it and their martial arts are higher than mine, what fun would there be?" Zhang Xiaohu also nodded and took a step forward. "We must be careful about this matter. We must not let others know about it, especially the people from the fragrant cult. I heard that the destruction of our Misty sect seemed to be related to this matter. We must not repeat the same mistake." "I know, senior brother," Chen said softly. "I'm not that stupid." Chang'e naturally nodded. Then Zhang Xiaohu asked, "Xiaohua, when is it suitable for Chang'e and Chen to take these pills? Will Chang'e's injury affect them?" Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and asked, "Sister Chang'e, the bones in your arm are broken and now I'm fixing them. Don't you know that it will affect your internal strength?" Chang'e smiled and said, "When I woke up just now, I already tried it. It didn't affect me much." "Well, that's good," Zhang Xiaohua said. "It's best to take it after the bones are healed, but it's okay to take it now." When Zhang Xiaohu heard this, he immediately urged, "Then what are you hesitating for? If Chang'e's arm is healed after 100 days, won't it take a few months? Not to mention that Xiaohua may not be cheap. Even the environment of our Misty Hall is not suitable to take this kind of pill. Everything should be done in the Yulon Grand Canyon." Zhang Xiaohu, on the other hand, was more anxious than Chang'e. Chapter 683. Zhang Xiaohua didn't understand the meaning of Zhang Xiaohu's words. She only thought that the situation of Shixin Peak was the same as what she had heard from Bai Huan, which was under the supervision of the fragrance cult. It was definitely inappropriate to help Chang'e and Chen improve their skills. So she nodded and said, "Second brother is right. I am now a little pharmacist in the Tuiden Hall, and I stay in Tianmu Peak. It is unrealistic to go to your Shixin Peak. Sister Chang'e's meridians are smooth, and her arms are not affected too much." Tuiden Hall? Little pharmacist? Tianmu Peak? The three people were even more surprised and exclaimed. They had been in the fragrance cult for a long time, and were clear about the affairs of the fragrance cult. When they were about to ask in detail, Zhang Xiaohua waved her hand and said, "Let's not talk about the specific story. It's too long. You just need to know." Then she looked at the sky and said, "Anyway, it will take a long time to refine orchid dusk. We might as well stay here for one more day, and take the elixir." Chang'e didn't answer, and looked up at Zhang Xiaohu. 20 years of skills was like a pie falling from the sky. If Chang'e wasn't tempted, it was definitely not true. However, since yesterday, the window paper between Chang'e and Zhang Xiaohu was broken. Chang'e was no longer just Zhang Xiaohu's senior sister. Chang'e still had to listen to Zhang Xiaohu's opinion on some things. It had to be said that Chang'e was really a nice person. Before Zhang Xiaohu said anything, Chen was happy. She pulled out her hand holding Chang'e and snapped her fingers, shouting, "Zhang Xiaohua, you are great!" Zhang Xiaohu wouldn't stop her. He looked at Chang'e and said, "Xiaohua is right. We still have time, so we might as well do it here." Then she turned her head and asked, "Xiaohua, shall we take it now?" "Well, there's no time to lose. Let's go to the cave and let Sister Chang'e take it first, then let Chen take it." Hearing Zhang Xiaohua call her Chen again, Chen was a little unhappy. "Zhang Xiaohua, I'm your senior sister. Why do you call Chang'e senior sister, and call me by my name? This. Looking at Chen Chen, who was a full head shorter than him, Zhang Xiaohua really did not know whether she was older or younger than him. Back then, at the Ethereal Villa Martial Arts exhibition, he had only seen Chen Chen once. At that time, Chen Chen was not much taller than him. Moreover, she also had a round face with baby fat, so it was impossible to tell her age. How could he call her senior sister? Thus, Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "Shouldn't a girl's age be kept a secret?" Chen Chen was stunned, and didn't know what Zhang Xiaohua meant. He nodded and said, "Yes. What's wrong?" "So I don't know your age and you can't tell me. Since you're younger than me, you can't escape from being called junior sister. However, between junior sister and Chen Chen, which name will you choose?" Chen Chen was anxious and cried, "How can you call me junior sister?" Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and said with a smile, "So I call you Chen Chen? What's wrong with that?" This. Chen Chen was a little confused and didn't understand what was wrong. Chang'e stood beside Chen Chen with a smile on the corner of her mouth. Since she came to the fragrance cult, it was very difficult for Chang'e to have such a smile on her face. However, she had laughed more in the past 2 days than in the previous years. At this moment, there was a wolf howl at the foot of the mountain. Everyone looked in the direction of the howl, and saw that it was the new Blood Wolf King leading dozens of blood wolves. Soon the wolf pack came to the foot of the mountain. The Blood Wolf King went straight up the mountain, and the other blood wolves quickly walked to the side of the previous blood wolves. The blood wolves from last night all howled and ran in the direction of the Blood Wolf King. When the Blood Wolf King came up to the hill, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but frown. She hadn't seen the Blood Wolf King for a night, and there seemed to be some changes. Zhang Xiaohua couldn't see many subtle changes, but the original brown fur had gradually turned yellow, and there was a golden luster, which Zhang Xiaohua could see clearly. Maybe, the new Blood Wolf King drank the blood of the previous Blood Wolf King yesterday, so the new Blood Wolf King changed like this. Zhang Xiaohua understood. Blood Wolf, maybe this is the meaning of the word blood? The Blood Wolf King came to Zhang Xiaohua's side, and circled around Zhang Xiaohua, then walked to Chen Chen. Chen Chen knew that the Blood Wolf King wouldn't hurt her, but after all, she was still afraid. Although Chang'e heard about it from Chen Chen in the morning, now that she saw it, she couldn't help trembling with fear. Zhang Xiaohua saw this and quickly caught up with the Blood Wolf King. She took the black puppy from Chen Chen and said, "You help Sister Chang'e back to the cave first. You two stay a little further away. Don't be in a hurry to take the blood. Regulate your internal force and wait for me to go in and take it. I'll help you to dissolve the medicine." Chang'e and Chang'e couldn't wait to leave, so they just casually agreed and walked away. The black puppy, which was not much bigger than little Martin, was held by Zhang Xiaohua with one hand. It was still like little Martin, with its eyes tightly closed. The Blood Wolf King came closer, but stopped when it was about 3 steps away. It respectfully squatted on the ground and quietly watched. Zhang Xiaohua touched the black puppy's smooth and shiny fur and said with a smile, "Brother Wolf, don't be so polite. Little Martin is still asleep and can't see you." The Blood Wolf King didn't quite understand, so it only growled a few times and still sat upright. Zhang Xiaohua thought for a moment and said, "Although you can't speak, I guess you're here to guard little Martin. Then you should carefully squat here. I have something to do in the cave. If you don't come in, don't come in." After that, she said to Zhang Xiaohu, "Let's go, second brother. Let's also enter the cave. With the Blood Wolf King guarding the entrance for us, which beast in the Yulon Grand Canyon would dare to disturb us?" The two laughed and entered the cave. The Blood Wolf King was still squatting there, quietly and without making a sound. Inside the cave, Chang'e and Chen Chen sat on opposite sides with their eyes closed. Zhang Xiaohua looked at the black puppy and handed it to Zhang Xiaohu. "You hold it, second brother. This is our protective talisman in the Yulon Grand Canyon." Zhang Xiaohu was startled. He carefully took it from Zhang Xiaohua's hands and said, "Xiaohua, what do you mean? How come I don't understand? This puppy looks like it hasn't reached full term. Maybe it will die in a while. How can it be our protective talisman?" After thinking for a moment, Zhang Xiaohua said, "Forget it, it's nothing. Second brother, You just hold it. Zhang Xiaohu nodded. This black puppy was so pitiful. What was the big deal about carefully holding it? While they were talking, Chen Chen and Chang'e opened their eyes at the same time and said, Xiaohua, you've done 3 cycles of internal energy. Is it okay? Yes, it's okay. Sister Chang'e, are your meridians blocked? Chang'e smiled and said, Before I fell into a coma yesterday, the internal energy in my meridians was exhausted and I was seriously injured. However, there was no blockage. After taking your elixir, I checked it just now and it's much better. Very good. Zhang Xiaohua nodded and said to Chen Chen, I'll help Sister Chang'e dissolve the medicine first. Wait a moment. Okay. Chen Chen got up and handed a soothing pulse pill to Chang'e. Chang'e took it with her uninjured hand and looked at Zhang Xiaohua. Then I'm convinced. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and nodded slightly. Chang'e looked at Zhang Xiaohu again and put the soothing pulse pill into her mouth. Just like Zhang Xiaohu, the refreshing fragrance of the medicine immediately spread out from her mouth, and a warm current rushed into her meridians. Chang'e didn't dare to delay and immediately used her internal energy to guide the warm current along her meridians into her lower dantian. Zhang Xiaohua also transferred her internal energy into Chang'e's meridians at the beginning. Although Chang'e's meridians hadn't been nourished and transformed by starlight, her internal energy had been tempered by the Misty School for more than 10 years. Zhang Xiaohua wrapped the soothing pulse pill with her internal energy and slowly released its efficacy. Chang'e's meridians were also repaired and tempered inch by inch under the effect of the soothing pulse pill. After an unknown period of time, Chang'e had run her internal breath 3 times. At this time, the efficacy of the meridian moistening pill had refined her tendons and meridians 3 times. The width and toughness of her tendons and meridians had changed dramatically. However, Chang'e's tendons and meridians were weaker than Zhang Xiaohu's. Therefore, the meridian moistening pill's transformation of her tendons and meridians was still inferior to Zhang Xiaohu's. Even the remaining efficacy was much more than Zhang Xiaohu's. Zhang Xiaohua sighed in his heart. He retracted his jinqi and whispered, Elder Sister Chang'e, I've already helped you absorb a portion of the pill's medicinal strength. The rest will depend on you. However, don't be like my second brother and absorb it all at once. It's best if you absorb it bit by bit. Chang'e's internal energy cultivation compared to Zhang Xiaohu's was like the difference between heaven and earth. How could she not understand this principle? Without waiting for Zhang Xiaohua to finish speaking, Zhang Xiaohu immediately activated his heart sutra and began to refine it bit by bit. Even Zhang Xiaohu's control and precision of Zhang Chang'e's internal energy was something that Zhang Xiaohu could not match. Seeing that Chang'e had begun to refine the remaining efficacy of the pill, Zhang Xiaohua walked to Chen Chen's side and helped him transform his meridians. Needless to say, Chen Chen's meridians were much worse than Chang'e's. His meridians were narrow and fragile. Zhang Xiaohua had to be more careful in controlling the release of the efficacy of the pill. She was afraid that Chen Chen's meridians would swell and burst. After 3 cycles of transformation, the remaining efficacy of the nourishing meridians pill in Chen Chen's lower dantian was more than Chang'e's. Zhang Xiaohua smiled bitterly. It seemed that this pill that increased power had different effects on different people. Just this nourishing meridians pill alone had so much efficacy that it could not be used up. Then what about the qi-generating pill? Zhang Xiaohua had temporarily given up the idea of letting them take the qi-generating pill. For Chen Chen, Zhang Xiaohua did not dare to withdraw her internal energy immediately. Instead, she waited for Chen Chen to refine a little bit of the efficacy of the pill. After she knew that there would be no problems, she withdrew it. She said to Zhang Xiaohu, who had been watching from the side, Well, second brother, I've done what I can do. What's left is to refine the efficacy of the pill. I think second brother also knows this. As for how many years of power it can increase, that depends on each person's fate. Then he took the little black dog from Zhang Xiaohu's hands and said in a low voice, Second brother, you should also quickly adjust your breathing. If you can properly control the power of these 20 years before we leave the valley, we can do it for a few more decades. Zhang Xiaohu was stunned. He had always heard that inner strength was cultivated by oneself. Why did Zhang Xiaohua say that it was obtained? Chapter 684. In the blue sky, the sun hung high in the sky. The huge halo around it shot out 7 colors. The whole sun was several times bigger than usual. On the great serene orchid prairie, a cool breeze still blew, causing the knee-high grass to sway left and right. Elk, antelope, grass rabbits, and the like were all leisurely nibbling on the grass and drinking water. When they were happy, they would even jump and run around as if they were in a good mood. Everything was peaceful. Suddenly, on the east side of the prairie near a mountain, the small animals stopped and straightened their ears. Then they all ran as far as they could, sometimes looking back as if something terrible had happened. Not long after, a group of tall blood wolves came from the distance. But strangely, they ignored the small animals and walked slowly, unhurriedly. This grassland was originally the territory of elk and other animals. Blood wolves were rare here, and it was really thought-provoking that they swaggered so openly. What was even more strange was that in the middle of the group of blood wolves, there were 4 carriages pulled by elk. Of the 4 carriages, only the first one had a tall and thin young man sitting lazily in the driver's seat. But he also closed his eyes and sat cross-legged. He didn't hold a whip. As long as the elk pulling the carriage deviated slightly or slacked off, a blood wolf would immediately run out from the wolf pack. With a sweep of its broom-sized tail, the elk would immediately change direction and obediently walk forward. The young man driving the carriage didn't need to do anything. The 3 carriages followed closely behind. The curtains were blown open, and there were some boxes inside. There was no one inside. At this time, not far from the cliff, a large group of jackdaws seemed to be alarmed by the advancing blood wolves. They cawed and sat cross-legged in the air in front of the carriage. They didn't fly away, as if attracted by something. From the side of the first carriage, a blood wolf with light golden fur quickly rushed out. The young man in the carriage let out a low growl and quickly rushed forward. At this time, a clear female voice came from the carriage. Zhang Xiaohua, why are there jackdaws in front? Along the way, although we saw many dried bloodstains, there were no corpses left. Jackdaws that specialize in pecking at carrion have never existed before. The young man opened his eyes and said, Chen Chen, this is the first time I've seen this jackdaw. How can I answer you? Won't we know when the Blood Wolf King returns? What can the Blood Wolf King say to you? Why don't we go up and take a look? If it's not Elk's corpse, then it's a disciple of the Aroma sect. It's better to have a complete corpse so that we can reincarnate well. A calm female voice said, Xiaohua, don't keep telling Xiaohua what to do. Now that you've refined the medicinal power of the pills, your internal energy cultivation is much higher than ours. It's time for you to go and take a look. Let second brother rest. He'll pass by in a while. We'll just bury him. The 4 of them were Zhang Xiaohua and her companions. That day, Zhang Xiaohua helped Chang'e and Chen Chen take the meridian nourishing pill to transform the meridians in their bodies. He left them another day and night to refine the remaining medicinal power. However, that was nearly 20 years of internal strength after all. It was not something that could be completed in a short period of time. The next day, Chang'e suggested that they go back. Although there was no danger in the Yulon Canyon, it was not a safe place. Therefore, no one had any objections. In the beginning, the 4 of them were like before, riding on ferocious beasts. However, when they passed by the forest where Zhang Xiaohu and the rest had first encountered the blood wolf, Chang'e's heart skipped a beat. There were more than 50 people from the Misty Hall, and they had already picked a lot of spiritual herbs. These were things that the hall urgently needed. If they were to be left here, then the dozens of lives that were left here would be worthless. Therefore, she wanted to bring back the dozens of carriages in the forest. This idea was beautiful, but how could it be justified? Even if the 4 of them had the elk, how could they bring back dozens of carriages? The disciples of the fragrance cult would not think that the beasts in the Yulon Canyon had changed to eating grass. In fact, even if the 4 of them each drove a carriage, it would be surprising. Zhang Xiaohua had raised an objection at that time. However, Zhang Xiaohu knew that the Misty Hall was short of these spiritual herbs. Moreover, They were the painstaking efforts of the dead disciples. If they did not bring them back, it would be really painful. Therefore, the three of them weighed the pros and cons. Well, except for Zhang Xiaohua, they collected the most precious spiritual herbs in the 4 carriages, and let the blood wolf capture 4 elk to pull the carriages. Thus there were now 4 large carriages. Of the dozens of spiritual herbs in the carriages, only 4 could be taken away. Chang'e and the others were of course very regretful. Just when they were about to leave the woods with extreme disappointment, Zhang Xiaohua found an excuse to leave for a moment. She returned to the woods and put the rest of the spiritual herbs into her belt. After all, Zhang Xiaohua had to spend a lot of effort to explain how she could ride the wind. In the end, it was not easy to convince them that as long as she practiced the ethereal steps to the 9th level, she could do it. This belt could store so many things. Perhaps even the divine skills of the Misty School could not explain it. Of course, Chen was very curious and asked, "How did you get the ethereal steps?" While Zhang Xiaohua fondly remembered O Peng, Master O, she also told her that this was a secret that Zhang Xiaohua and O Peng could not tell her. Zhang Xiaohua knew that Zhang Xiaohua had obtained the 3rd level of the ethereal steps, so now, after listening to Zhang Xiaohua's words, he was convinced. Therefore, Chen pestered Zhang Xiaohua again to tell her what happened after Zhang Xiaohua was in Shizue Mountain. She only regarded Zhang Xiaohua as a hero, and her eyes were full of stars. "I'm helpless, helpless." Thinking about how her mouth was dry from talking with Zhang Xiaohu, Chang'e, and Chen these days, Zhang Xiaohua felt a lingering fear. This trick of making up a story can only be done by those literati. I'm a rough person, so I can't do it. I was almost exposed several times, but I'm quite skilled at it after making it up a few times. When we get out of Chuanxiang cult, we can also play with literature and write a few books about chivalry and earn some money. In fact, Zhang Xiaohua did not want to tell the whole story to her second brother and her future sister-in-law. After all, her eldest brother and sister-in-law also knew about it. She could not favor one and discriminate against the other. However, thinking of the dungeon on Baiyufeng, Zhang Xiaohua had a bad feeling. In such a dangerous place, it was better to keep a secret. She was not only responsible for herself, but also for her relatives. These days, the journey was also leisurely. Zhang Xiaohu had basically adapted to the newly added 20 years' worth of skills. When he occasionally sparred with Zhang Xiaohua, he would not reveal the white line on the top of his head. The wind between his fists and feet was also slowly restrained, gradually returning to the original state. In terms of refining the medicinal power, Chang'e and Chen were not as good as Zhang Xiaohu. They could only refine a small part of the remaining medicinal power every day. This was related to the foundation of their meridians, and also because they were women. However, they were not in a hurry. After all, they were from a famous family. They knew that the slower they refined, the more solid their foundation would be. Moreover, in just a few days, they had gained several years' worth of skills. They could not even dream of it, so how could they have other thoughts? Therefore, along the way, only Zhang Xiaohua sat in front of the carriage, seemingly driving the carriage. The others hid in the carriage and worked hard. At this time, they had already left the mountain ridge and entered the Yulon Prairie. If there were no accidents, they would reach the mouth of the Yulon Canyon in 2 or 3 days. Thinking of this, Zhang Xiaohua could not help but feel a little depressed. Second brother was found, and he was in good condition. Her task of passing on the incense cult had been completed. Perhaps the next step should be to cultivate at the top of Tianmu Peak. After all, after seeing the abilities of Huangfeng and the Blood Wolf King, her cultivation of the middle qi refining stage was really a little weak. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohu walked out of the carriage and approached Zhang Xiaohua. He whispered, "What's wrong? Are you thinking about that little fishy of yours?" Zhang Xiaohua was surprised. She curled her lips and said, "Second brother, we haven't seen each other for a few years. You've made great progress. Do you think everyone is like you? Once you see elder sister Chang'e, you'll lose your soul and even call out her name in your dreams. Little fishy and I have a pure relationship of brother and sister." "Ihi Xiaohua, you're not young anymore. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? Haven't you heard of the saying in Lingering Fragrance Peak? Guard against fire, theft and senior brothers? It's referring to senior brothers like you who talk about pure relationships with others. Zhang Xiaohua was dumbfounded. She said, how can there be such an interesting saying? I've never heard of it. Oh, that's right. You've only been here for less than 2 months. No wonder you haven't heard of it. Zhang Xiaohu suddenly understood. He then said, hee, if you tell your second brother the secret of using the sword, I'll let your second sister-in-law talk to little fishy about it. Gosh! Zhang Xiaohua finally understood what her second brother was planning. Zhang Xiaohu was the only one who knew about the dream-chasing sword. Zhang Xiaohua had never mentioned it in front of him. However, Zhang Xiaohu had only seen such a magical thing in the legends of chivalry. He had been itching for it for a long time. Seeing that Zhang Xiaohua did not mention it, he knew that it was an extremely secretive thing. He did not ask about it in front of her, and only asked secretly. Zhang Xiaohua only used some gimmicks to coax him. How could Zhang Xiaohu be fooled? Therefore, as long as he found an opportunity, he would come up and coerce her. Hee, second brother, if that's the case, I'll tell this to my second sister-in-law. You're Chen Chen's senior brother. Shouldn't Chen Chen also guard against you? You, Zhang Xiaohu's face turned red. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, don't ask about this matter. You should focus on cultivating the Misty Seven Swords, and use the Jade Water Sword to form the sword light. Then, you can go anywhere you want in this world. Speaking of the Jade Water Sword, Zhang Xiaohu took it out from his bosom and caressed it lovingly. He smiled and said, forget it. Seeing that you've given me a treasured sword, I won't force you. However, if you want to force the sword out, you'll need at least 50 years of cultivation. While they were talking, the Blood Wolf King howled and ran over from a distance. Hearing the sound, Zhang Xiaohua was stunned. Second brother, is there something up ahead? Calm. There are more chapters. Chapter 685. Zhang Xiaohu thought for a moment and nodded. That's right, we are not loved by our grandparents, and no one cares about us. This is a good excuse. Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, the key is that you should have strong martial arts, but I shouldn't have strong martial arts. So you can be my saviors. Then her eyes lit up and said, I can use this excuse to visit you at Shirxin Peak. Isn't this the best of both worlds? Good, this matter is settled. It's just a word. Right, speaking of female disciples, it seems that Shiyu Hall doesn't have any female disciples, but Qianquan Hall seems to have some. But I don't know if any of the female disciples of Qianquan Hall came this time. Well, there are also female intersect disciples and intersect alchemy disciples. When I was in the trial, I saw a female intersect alchemy disciple. It's unlikely that there are female intersect disciples. Their martial arts are very high, so how could they fall into this ordinary Yulan Twilight Canyon? If it's possible, then she must be one of the intersect alchemy disciples you mentioned. Zhang Xiaohua nodded. Zhang Xiaohu's analysis was not wrong. Judging from the woman's meridians and residual internal force, this woman's martial arts were about the same as the intersect alchemy disciple Zhang Pinger. Perhaps they both came to the Yulan Grand Canyon to collect rare spiritual herbs. Only the two of them could run around in this Yulan Grand Canyon. Zhang Pinger's luck was good. She had bumped into him 3 times, which was why she didn't turn into beast dung early on. This woman's luck was slightly worse. She bumped into him before she died. The more she thought about it, the more reasonable it was. At this time, Chen Chen shouted, 2 scholars, we have finished our work. Should we carry her to the front of the carriage? Chang Ji's arm was injured and was fixed by Zhang Xiaohua. Most of the cleaning and dressing was done by Chen Chen. At this time, her forehead was already sweating. Zhang Xiaohua turned around and walked to the woman's side. He looked at her face that had already been washed. The 2 eye sockets were very miserable without any eyeballs. He took out a handkerchief from his pocket and wrapped it around her eyes. He said, wait a moment. I still have to straighten the bones in her head. Then she said to Zhang Xiaohu, second brother, help me get some straight branches. I have to fix this woman's broken bones. Saying this, she covered the woman's head with her hand and lifted it up. As Zhang Xiaohua's right hand left, the woman's hair fell off, revealing a pale and blood-stained scalp. Zhang Xiaohua put her hand on the head again, and silently used her genuine qi to move the displaced skull back to its original position. Then she took water from Qin Qin and carefully washed the head, applying the blood coagulation pill. At this time, Zhang Xiaohu took the branches back. Zhang Xiaohua fixed the woman's thighs and arms one by one. Finally, she took out a jade bottle from her bosom and wanted to pour out a bone coagulation pill. But when she held it in her hand, she muttered. After thinking for a while, she took it back and took out another jade bottle from her bosom. She poured out 2 pills and fed them to the woman. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua clapping his hands and looking like he was done, the 3 beside him heaved a sigh of relief. They were very lucky to have met Zhang Xiaohua. If it weren't for him, they would have lost their lives. Even if they had come here and met this dying female disciple, they probably wouldn't have been able to help even if they wanted to. However, Qin Qin was very surprised to see that Zhang Xiaohua could take out different kinds of pills from her bosom and asked, "How many pills do you have?" Zhang Xiaohua looked unfathomable. I can't tell you. Chang'e asked. "What kind of pills did you give her? Is it the bone coagulation pill? Why did you change it in the middle?" Zhang Xiaohua shook her head. "No, it's the small bone coagulation pill." Then she explained, she is an inner disciple. This bone coagulation pill is not from the fragrance cult. If it is found by her teacher, it seems that we can't explain it. Although we want to save her, we can't get ourselves involved. Well, Sister Chang'e, don't worry. Although these 2 small bone coagulation pills are not as good as the bone coagulation pill, they are enough. They are not from the fragrance cult? Qin Qin and Chang'e were stunned. Seeing that they were a little stunned, Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile, "Sister Chang'e, you and Qin Qin can tidy up the second carriage. Put more dry and soft things on it. I'll send her to the carriage now." Okay. Chang'e and Qin Qin woke up from their dream and hurried back to tidy up. Soon, they waved their hands in the carriage. Zhang Xiaohua knew that everything was ready. She silently ran her genuine qi and cast several incantations to fix the woman's body. Then she stretched out her arms to hold the woman steadily, and slowly sent her to the carriage. After everything was done, the 4 of them got on the carriage again. Qin Qin didn't forget to ask, "Is she alone in the carriage behind? Do you need me to keep an eye on her?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled. "No, if there is no big change, she will not wake up for 10 days or half a month. You can't do anything by her side." Qin Qin's face was full of longing. She said, "Zhang Xiaohua, your medical skills are really good. Did you learn from Nie Xiaoyu?" Gosh, Zhang Xiaohua's face was full of black lines. She regretted telling them too much. Then she said angrily, "I learned from her senior brother." Well, let's not talk about it. We still have to hurry, but we have to slow down in the future. Don't let the carriage be too bumpy. It will probably take 1 more day. Hee 1 more day is 1 more day. Qin Qin picked up the little black dog from the carriage and looked at the blood wolves surrounding the carriage. There were also some other beasts around. She said with a smile, "With these beasts protecting us, I'll just treat it as a spring walk." Of course, with Zhang Xiaohua's protection and the protection of hundreds of blood wolves around the carriage, Qin Qin and the others were naturally not in any danger. 5 days later, they steadily approached the mouth of the Yulon Grand Canyon. Seeing the mouth of the canyon, Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to let the blood wolves go any further. If the people of the fragrance cult saw a pack of blood wolves escorting them, wouldn't they transfer the hatred of the many disciples to them? After a few days of getting along, the Blood Wolf King gradually became more intelligent and was more familiar with Zhang Xiaohua. When it saw Zhang Xiaohua rubbing its head and pointing in the direction they came from, it already understood what he meant. It was just that it was reluctant to leave, so it rubbed its head on Zhang Xiaohua's body and licked Zhang Xiaohua's hand with its tongue. This guy is becoming more and more like the big yellow dog from the Guozhuang house. Zhang Xiaohua thought maliciously. Then he walked to the back of the carriage and carried Chang'e and the others. He picked up the little yellow mink and the little black dog and placed them in front of his chest. The hundreds of blood wolves and other beasts all growled and prostrated themselves on the ground as if they were worshipping him. Then they got up, shook off the dust, and left in the direction they came from. Not long after, they all disappeared without a trace. Zhang Xiaohua held the little mink and the little dog in his arms, and turned the carriage around. He said with a smile, "Okay, the master who sent the guests off has returned. We should go back." At this time, Chen Chen shouted, "Where's my little black dog? Give it back to me." "Gosh," Zhang Xiaohua curled his lips and said, "It's clearly mine. When did it become yours?" However, as he spoke, he still took out the small black puppy that was not much bigger than a mouse and handed it over. However, the little black puppy that had been sleeping in Chen Chen's arms all this while was not behaving well at this moment. Its eyes were closed, and its little head was swaying left and right. Its little nose was sniffing nonstop, and its entire body was twisting here and there. Chen Chen did not understand and wondered, could it be that this little black puppy is female? It stuck to Zhang Xiaohua when he hugged it. As he said that, he handed it over to Zhang Xiaohua. Indeed, once the little black dog was in Zhang Xiaohua's hands, its nose stopped twitching and it obediently bent down. Its little head even tried to burrow into Zhang Xiaohua's arms. The other two were also a little dumbfounded. Along the way, Zhang Xiaohua did not pay much attention to the little black dog. It was almost always carried by Chen Chen. How could it be ungrateful when it passed through Zhang Xiaohua's arms? I knew it. This little black dog must be a girl. Chen Chen was very indignant. Fine. Seeing the little black dog like this, Zhang Xiaohua did not hand it over to Chen Chen. There were two little mice on the left and right and he could hold as much as he wanted in his arms, so he still put it together with the little mink. Next to the little mink was a small primordial stone that Zhang Xiaohua usually used for cultivation. The carriage traveled for another half an hour, and had already arrived at the mouth of the canyon. It was the place where Huang Feng killed the disciples of Wuming Hall that day. At that time, when Zhang Xiaohua escaped, the mouth of the valley was still piled up like a mountain. The bodies of many disciples were casually thrown at the mouth of the valley. At this time, the mouth of the valley was clean. There were only black bloodstains on the ground, scattered long swords, and tattered rags occasionally blown away by the wind, indicating that there had been a heroic moment here. Zhang Xiaohu and the other two did not witness it with their own eyes, but with Zhang Xiaohua's narration, they also saw their fellow disciples become food in the mouth of the blood wolf. Naturally, they could empathize with the tragedy at that time. Now that they saw the ground that had long been soaked in blood, they could not help but become solemn. It was just that the mouth of the valley was too clean, which made Zhang Xiaohua a little puzzled. The bodies of so many disciples of Wuming Hall, were they taken away by the people of the fragrance cult? Or were they eaten by the ferocious beasts in the Yulon Grand Canyon? However, Zhang Xiaohua would not ask such questions to Chang'e and Chen Chen. After waiting for a while, she said, "Second brother, it's going to be dusk soon. Do you know the time and route to leave the valley?" Zhang Xiaohu raised his eyes to look at the sun that was still hanging in the west. He nodded and said, "I know. Before we entered the valley, the hall master specially explained everything, especially the matters of entering and exiting the valley. Everyone remembered it by heart. This time is just right. When we reach the dense forest, we should be able to leave." "Good. Second brother, from now on, I am the disciple of the pill repository hall that you saved." After saying that, she jumped into the third carriage and sat obediently with a frightened expression on her face. Seeing Zhang Xiaohua's behavior, Chen Chen almost burst out laughing. "Zhang Xiaohua, the valley is still far away. Why are you pretending so early?" "I'm just practicing. It's been a long time since I tricked people. I'm a little rusty," Zhang Xiaohua said in all seriousness. "Okay, let's go." Zhang Xiaohu patted the elk's buttocks, and the elk pulled the carriage straight out of the Yulon Grand Canyon. Seeing the huge mountain range receding from her side, Zhang Xiaohua couldn't help but feel a little sad. That day, there were nearly 500 disciples who entered the valley. However, when it ended, only 9 of them survived. She wondered what kind of expression the hall master of the pill repository hall, Old Man Zishen, would have on his face if he knew this news. Sigh, let bygones be bygones. Senior brothers, May your souls rest in peace. Zhang Xiaohua stood up and looked back at the valley entrance that was getting narrower and narrower. She secretly prayed in her heart. The Yulan dusk refinement was finally over. Chapter 686. It was still early. When Zhang Xiaohua and the others came out of the valley and came to the open space between the valley and the dense forest, the setting sun was still high in the sky. Zhang Xiaohua pretended to stay in the third carriage. After looking for a long time, she did not see any disciples of the fragrance cult. Could it be that the trial has already passed? Zhang Xiaohua was a little surprised. She counted with her fingers and found that it had only been 20 days. Was 1 month too long? Could it be that the inhibition has been activated in advance? Zhang Xiaohua frowned for a while. Seeing that there was no one around, Zhang Xiaohua flew to Zhang Xiaohu's carriage. Zhang Xiaohu, who was driving the carriage, was surprised. He patted his chest and said, "Xiaohua, your lightness skill is too good. I heard from my master that Master O is just SOSO. Pretend, just pretend," Zhang Xiaohua said with a smile. "I didn't see you speak so exaggeratedly at home. Now, why are you so?" Chang'e, who was behind the carriage, asked. "Xiaohua, what was your second brother like at home?" "Nothing, Sister Chang'e. When my second brother was at home, he was a flower in the field. Everyone praised him." Pfft. Chen Chen and Chang'e both laughed and said, "We heard your second brother say that a flower in the field depends on dung." Ah. Zhang Xiaohua was a little dumbfounded. Then she rolled her eyes and was about to speak, but she was interrupted by the blushing Zhang Xiaohu. He said, "Why don't you pretend to be injured in the back? What are you doing here?" Zhang Xiaohua shrugged and said, "There is no one here. Who will see me?" When Chen Chen heard this, he suddenly said, "By the way, Zhang Xiaohua, since you can pretend to be seriously injured, why don't you just pretend to be dead? There's no need to return to the pill-expanding hall. Follow us to Shixin Peak. A few days ago, didn't you ask about your villa Master O and Sister Qiutong? Come with us now. They might be very happy to see you." "Io." Zhang Xiaohua slapped her head and said, "That's a good idea. Why didn't I think of it?" Inside the carriage, Chang'e smiled and said, "It's a pity that Xiaohua can't change her appearance. If it's the same as changing her name, she can change into another person. Otherwise, although the fragrant cult is big, it will be seen by the disciples of the Pill Tower Hall. At that time it would be bad." Zhang Xiaohu also sighed and said, "How can it be that easy? Even if she can change into another person, there will be one more person in our Shixin Peak. How can the fragrant cult not know?" In fact, Zhang Xiaohua immediately realized that Chen Chen was joking with her. She also said, "Unless I become one of the disciples who came here for the trial, otherwise don't mention it." Speaking of the disciples of the Misty Hall, Zhang Xiaohu and the rest were equally sad. They recalled the cheerful voices and laughter of their fellow disciples. These were the elites of the Misty Hall. Now, all of them were buried in the Yulan Grand Canyon. Only the 3 of them managed to return. For the Misty Hall, it was like adding one disaster after another. However, thinking of the rare spiritual herbs in the 4 carriages and the situation in the Misty Hall, they only hoped that the harvest this time could slightly compensate for the loss. Suddenly, Zhang Xiaohua slapped her forehead again and said, "I forgot one thing." "Oh, forget it. Let's talk about it when I have time to go to Shixin Peak in person." Chen Chen was curious and asked, "What is it?" Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "I don't know if Sister Qiutong is married. If she is, we have to be careful about this matter." Chen Chen was even more puzzled and said, "No, Qiutong and Oyen are all alone." "That's good." Zhang Xiaohua smiled and said, "I still have the confession letter from Sister Qiutong's admirer after that. She told them about her exploration of the righteous alliance in the past." When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but sigh. Needless to say, this disciple of the Misty School must have been buried in the unforgettable annihilation of the Misty School's disciples. If not for Qiuju's intentions, this disciple's intentions would have dissipated between heaven and earth. "Well, you have to personally pass this letter to Qiutong." Chang'e also agreed. "To comfort this disciple's soul in heaven." While talking, the 4 carriages had already reached the edge of the dense forest, but the white fog still covered the entire forest. How could they see the way out? Zhang Xiaohua frowned and said, "Second brother, do you think the restriction of Twilight Orchid will be closed in advance?" When Zhang Xiaohua heard this, his expression changed and he said, It's really hard to say." When the 2 people in the carriage heard this, they also walked out. Zhang Xiaohua said, "I don't know what you told us when you came, but since it can be opened in advance, it's very likely that it will close in advance. It's been more than 20 days, so it's normal for there to be some changes." Chen Chen said involuntarily, "If we can't get out, won't we have to stay here for 5 years? And it's said that the disciples who didn't get out in time, even the inner disciples, have never been seen again." Zhang Xiaohua didn't agree with this. He had seen the remarkable power of Huangfeng with his own eyes, and also saw the fall of Huangfeng and He Dian. He roughly knew that these were probably the actions of those 2 in the past. Now, little Huangfeng and little He Dian were in his arms, waiting for him to be their father. How could he and the others follow in the footsteps of others? Zhang Xiaohu looked at the graceful Chang'e on the carriage, and a smile appeared on his lips. He thought to himself, if it's like this, then it's a kind of immortal-like life. Chang'e also understood Zhang Xiaohu's thoughts and nodded slightly at him. Zhang Xiaohu's heart was instantly filled with sweetness. Not to mention the 2 of them, the sun on the western mountain ridge was halfway down. Chen Chen looked at the dense fog in the forest and said in surprise, "Senior sister, senior brother, look, the white fog has begun to recede." Zhang Xiaohu and Chang'e reluctantly moved their eyes away from each other and looked into the forest. Sure enough, the milky fog was gradually retreating from the edge of the forest into the forest. The more it retreated, the clearer it became. Fortunately, Zhang Xiaohua also felt relieved. Although it was not necessarily a bad thing to be able to live freely in the Yulin Grand Canyon for 5 years, he still wanted to pass the news of Zhang Xiaohu's survival to the Guozhuang house as soon as possible, so that his parents could live peacefully in their old age. "Get ready, Xiaohua. This is the last part of the trip out of the valley, so there isn't much danger. But you still have to be careful. Don't fail at the last step." "I know, second brother. When we came in, our caravan encountered a lot of accidents." While they were talking, the 4 elks pulling the carriage suddenly panicked. They knocked their hooves and retreated slightly. Zhang Xiaohua frowned and suddenly remembered that when the yellow wind chased the inner disciples of the lingering fragrance peak, it only chased them to the entrance of the valley and stopped, not daring to take half a step forward. The elks were also wild beasts in the Yulin Grand Canyon. How could they reach the edge of the forest? Oh no, if the elks can't pass through the forest, or if they are afraid of the forest, what should we do? While he was thinking, Zhang Xiaohua's heart gave him another warning. His spiritual sense was currently suppressed by the restriction of the fragrant religion, and was also absorbed by the silver eye in his left hand. He could only see about 3 meters ahead of him, which was far less effective than when he first started the Yulin Twilight refinement. His heart was on alert, and presumably, danger wasn't far away. Without thinking, Zhang Xiaohua took out several jade talismans from his bosom and crushed them with his hands, throwing them around the 4 carriages. 4 water-like ripples were transmitted from the restriction, and the 4 elks gradually calmed down. However, they were still hesitant as they looked at the forest in front of them. At this moment, the setting sun had already approached the mountain range of the Yulin Grand Canyon. A ray of brilliance streaked across the sky and illuminated the forest. Not long after, a path of light appeared from afar and meandered under everyone's feet. However, this path of light was clearly not as bright as when Zhang Xiaohua and the others had first entered. Now it was much dimmer. Needless to say, anyone who saw it knew that there wasn't much time left on this path of light. Or perhaps it wouldn't exist for long, so they needed to pass through it in time. Zhang Xiaohua didn't dare to be negligent. He asked Chang'e and Chen Chen for several silk scarves and other things, and covered the eyes of the elks. They were like the fragrant religion's caravan crossing the mountain stream. The blindfolded elks were much more stable, but in this case, Chang'e and Chen Chen would each need a carriage. And this was in line with Zhang Xiaohua's previous plan. In addition, each of them had to drive a carriage, so it was reasonable. Zhang Xiaohua drove the first carriage, followed by Chang'e, Chen Chen, and Zhang Xiaohua, of course, was still at the back. Moreover, he was still standing high on the carriage. He released his divine sense to cover the 4 carriages. The path of light was still calm, strange and long. After traveling for more than half an hour, they still didn't see any movement. Instead, there were some inexplicable attacks from the dense forest from time to time. They gently hit the restriction that Zhang Xiaohua had previously placed on the carriage. It was unknown whether the attacks were aimed at the group or the elks. Although the attacks were silent and Zhang Xiaohua and the others didn't notice, they were frequent. Not long after, the restriction of the Jade Talisman was broken. Zhang Xiaohua had to use the Jade Talisman again. After traveling for more than half of the distance, Zhang Xiaohua's defensive Jade Talisman had been exhausted. He didn't expect to encounter such a situation. He couldn't bring enough Jade Talismans with him, so Zhang Xiaohua could only take out primordial stones to absorb the primordial qi and replenish the magic incantation for the 4 carriages. However, the speed of absorption was far slower than the speed of consumption. Seeing that 2 hours were almost up, the true qi in Zhang Xiaohua's body was also exhausted. Seeing that there seemed to be no end to the path of light ahead, Zhang Xiaohua was very anxious. At this time, he understood the feeling of senior brother Chen, the leader of Wuming Hall. Would they die here in the end? While he was thinking, he suddenly heard Zhang Xiaohua say with a smile, "Chang'e, hold on a little longer. I have already seen the light ahead." What? Hearing this, Zhang Xiaohua almost fell off the carriage. As the saying goes, when you marry a wife, you forget your mother. This sentence is really right. Your brother is so busy behind you, but you don't even say a word of comfort. Your wife is just pretending, but you are so concerned about her. Sigh Zhang Xiaohua, this guy, he even got jealous over such things. That you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.